Chapter 45-40. High up in the sky, even though Hua Qiqiong was trapped inside the Nine Wonders formation, he was still calm and composed. What was even more bizarre was that a third eye had appeared on his forehead. An other pupil. Yu Jiwei's expression changed when he saw the third eye on Hua Qiqiong's forehead. He exclaimed in surprise, but quickly calmed down and chuckled. I didn't expect Lord Evil Exalted to possess an other pupil. However, you're underestimating me too much if you think you can break through my Nine Wonders formation with just one other pupil. Is that so? Hua Qiqiong smiled. The other pupil on his forehead suddenly opened and released a seven-colored light that streaked across the surrounding void like a rainbow. Wherever the seven-colored light swept past, space-time changed. It took on a strange form that resembled flowing water. How is this possible? When Yu Jiwei saw this scene, he was quite taken aback and had a look of horror. He never expected Hua Qiqiong's other pupil to be able to cause space-time to merge. The so-called merging was where space-time and the formation merged. The most terrifying thing about the Nine Wonders formation was that it merged with space-time. Thus, it was nearly impossible to break through the formation by force. It was impossible to find the eye of the Nine Wonders formation in a short period of time unless one was a top-notch formation master. However, Hua Qiqiong's other pupil was extremely strange. It could cause space-time to merge, allowing him to easily find the eye of the formation. Lord Evil Exalted, since you have such a trick up your sleeve, I can only give it my all. Yu Jiwei's gaze darkened as he growled. His eyes were like those of a ferocious wolf. As soon as he finished speaking, several sharp blades appeared in the void. They were extremely fast and piercing as they attacked Hua Qiqiong. Hua Qiqiao's expression did not change. He used a strange footwork technique and dodged the sharp blades in the blink of an eye. Yu Jiwei was stunned by the scene before him. His expression changed, and his eyes were filled with unconcealable shock. He never expected Hua Qiqiong to dodge his attack with just his footwork technique inside the Nine Wonders formation. Hua Qiqiong moved like a ghost, as if his strength was not affected by the formation at all. Prison Clan Kid, if the Nine Wonders formation is only this strong, then this battle should be over. Hua Qiqiao smiled. His third eye blossomed with a brilliant light. The light was like a ripple that spread throughout the barrier. He was trying to sense the existence of the formation eye. Nine Wonders, Heavenly Thunder Eradication. Yu Jiwei's expression darkened. He let out a low roar and waved his hand in the air. Suddenly, a powerful force appeared and a bolt of lightning appeared. It condensed into a lightning beast in the air. It roared and charged straight at Hua Qiqiong. Rumor has it that the Nine Wonders formation can control the Nine Element. It seems like it's true. Hua Qiqiao was not afraid at all when he felt the enormous pressure coming at him. He smiled faintly, and the scarlet flower around his body released a red light that shot out. Bang! In the next instant, the red light swept through the void, and with a muffled sound, the Thunder Beast was directly destroyed. At the same time, Yu Jiwei was hit by the violent force and could not help but retreat several thousand meters before he managed to stabilize himself. He was in an extremely sorry state. The Nine Wonders formation contains the power of the Nine Elements. It allows the formation designer to continuously absorb the Nine Elements' holy power for his own use. Hua Qiqiao was as calm as ever. He smiled faintly and said, Unfortunately, your Nine Wonders formation has not been cultivated to its peak, so you cannot completely control the power in the Nine Wonders formation. You also cannot perfectly hide the formation eye. You found the spirit formation eye? Yu Jiwei forced himself to calm down and asked in surprise. It's right here. Hua Qiqiao smiled. The scarlet flame around him spread out like a scroll, and it reflected a fist-sized Nine Elements whirlpool. It was the formation eye of the Nine Wonders formation. Lord Evil Dominator, I've lost. Yu Jiwei's eyes trembled, and he did not hesitate to admit defeat. Ha! You're very tactful. Hua Qiqiao smiled faintly and waved his hand. Forget it. Since you've admitted defeat, this battle ends here. How could he not know that the Nine Wonders formation and the formation designer had a close relationship and shared power? Once it was broken, the formation designer would definitely be heavily injured. Yu Jiwei did not want to be injured, so he admitted defeat. Thank you, Lord Evil Dominator. Yu Jiwei calmed himself down, put away the Nine Wonders formation, and bowed to express his gratitude. The corner of Hua Qiqiao's mouth twitched, but he did not say anything. Yu Jiwei did not stay any longer, and he immediately left. The crowd on the plaza and the viewing pavilion were dumbfounded, and it took them a long time to react. Who would have thought that even the experts from the prison clan would be defeated by this Lord Evil Dominator? This Evil Dominator is too powerful. The Fengtian sect was already in danger of being annihilated, but there was still such an expert helping them at such a crucial moment. Looks like the Fengtian sect's luck hasn't run out yet. In my opinion, this Lord Evil Dominator's strength is probably at the peak of all heavens. As the crowd spoke, they looked at Hua Qiqiao with unconcealable respect. Hua Qiqiao had easily defeated 3 people, and the strength he had displayed was indeed too shocking. Most importantly, Hua Qiqiao's true strength had yet to be revealed, and it was still unfathomable. In the viewing pavilion, Gu Ling Wuji's gloomy expression gradually relaxed. He had to admit that he had underestimated Hua Qiqiao. Hua Qiqiao's strength had indeed exceeded his expectations. However, Nie Tian, who was standing at the side, did not look any better. In fact, he seemed even more worried. Although Hua Qiqiao had defeated Xia Yunbei, the Million Returning Saber, and Yu Jiwei, Nie Tian knew that the 3 of them could not be considered peak experts, so it was normal for Hua Qiqiao to defeat them. After all, Hua Qiqiao was an existence that was on par with the selfless sword demon. However, the threat that the Fengtian sect faced was far more than what they saw. The Million Returning Saber, Yu Jiwei, and the others were at most small fries, and the real threat and killing intent were still at the back. If the experts from the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion or the Human Emperor's Palace appeared, would Hua Qiqiao still be able to hold on? However, the good news was that after Hua Qiqiao had won 3 consecutive battles, the other party only had 3 people left to fight. Nie Tian guessed that the next person to appear would be the true experts, and they would be the ones who could truly threaten the entire Fengtian sect. The small fries are almost finished, so why is the big fish hiding behind us not going to show itself? If Nie Tian could think of it, Hua Qiqiao could naturally think of it as well. He did not have any scruples and spoke loudly. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, the space in the distance shook. Following which, a strange scene appeared. Time and space were forcefully torn apart, and a murderous figure slowly walked out of the crack. The murderous aura around him filled the sky, and he was like a god of death descending. Mu Zhaoquan. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he saw the murderous figure, and he shouted out the other party's name. That's right, the person who had appeared was none other than one of the 3 abyss swords, Evil Sword Mu Zhaoquan. Chapter 45-41. Evil Sword Mu Zhaoquan. Nie Tian was very familiar with this person because he had almost died at his hands. Not long ago, Mu Zhaoquan had led the assassins from the abyss to invade. At that time, Nie Tian and Bing Xie had fallen into Mu Zhaoquan's evil flow forbidden world. Bing Xie had used the ghost taboo blade to fight Mu Zhaoquan and had been seriously injured, while Nie Tian had only taken 1 attack from Mu Zhaoquan and had also been seriously injured. Fortunately, Devil's Knight had been hiding in the evil flow forbidden world at that time and had cooperated with Nie Tian to break it. Unexpectedly, Mu Zhaoquan had appeared in front of everyone at this time. However, Nie Tian felt that Mu Zhaoquan's strength was not too strong. Even though the evil flow forbidden world had almost taken his life, It was not strong enough for him to remember it for the rest of his life. With Mu Zhaoquan's status, he should have been able to kill Nie Tian and Bing Xia at will, but he had failed. It was clear that his strength was not worthy of his reputation. Judging from Mu Zhaoquan's previous performance, he was not even as good as Xia Yunbei and the 10,000 return blade. However, at this time, Nie Tian looked at Mu Zhaoquan with some confusion. He felt that the latter's sword intent aura had changed. It was clearly much stronger than before, and the killing intent was also heavier. It gave off a more threatening feeling. Could it be that the person I saw that day was not Mu Zhaoquan? Nie Tian's face was filled with doubt and confusion. The Mu Zhaoquan in front of him was very different from the Mu Zhaoquan from before. The sword intent aura was somewhat similar, but it had more changes and was also stronger. What we saw that day should only be one of his sword intent clones. Just as Nie Tian was feeling confused, Fat Cat's voice rang out. Its tone was low and filled with worry. Sword intent clones? Nie Tian was stunned and became even more confused. He asked, if it was a sword intent clone, why did the sword intent aura change? This is why this person is so strong. I guess that he has more than one sword intent. Fat Cat replied in a low voice. It seemed to be very careful. Nie Tian's expression immediately changed, and he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Ordinary swordsmen only had one type of sword intent. Very few genius swordsmen had two or more types of sword intent. For example, Nie Tian first cultivated the Proud Sword Essence, and later cultivated the Star's Sword Essence. Later, he obtained the Thunderbolt Sword Essence, the Soul-Devouring Sword Essence, and the Three Evils Sword Essence by chance. However, after that, Nie Tian fused several types of sword intents together to form the Godfiend's sword intent of today. But now, Nie Tian still had the ability to separate the soul-devouring sword intent or the Three Evils sword intent from the Fiend God sword intent. Since Nie Tian could have many sword intents, the others could too. Mu Zhaoquan was one of the three Abyss swords and the strongest swordsman of the Abyss Ghoul race. It was normal for him to possess multiple sword intents. Therefore, it was extremely likely that the Mu Zhaoquan that Nie Tian saw last time was a sword intent clone of a certain type of sword intent condensed by his main body. You're from the Abyss Ghoul race. At this moment, Hua Qiqiong, who was high up in the sky, stared at Mu Zhaoquan. His expression involuntarily changed to one of great surprise. As a member of the Ghoul race, how could Hua Qiqiong not see that Mu Zhaoquan was from the Abyss Ghoul race? However, Hua Qiqiong had never imagined that he would encounter a martial practitioner from the Abyss Ghoul race who had disappeared a long time ago. One of the four great evil lords, Lord Hua Supreme, one of the strongest of the Ghoul race in the past. Now that I've seen you today, you truly live up to your reputation. Mu Zhaoquan slowly walked over. His footwork seemed slow, but his speed was actually very fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of Hua Qiqiong. It was obvious that Mu Zhaoquan was very familiar with Hua Qiqiong's name. He even had some unconcealable reverence towards him. This was not strange. After all, Hua Qiqiong was one of the four great evil lords. His status in the Ghoul race was extremely high. To Mu Zhaoquan, he was a famous senior. However, if one looked at their appearances, they would definitely think that the aged Mu Zhaoquan was a senior, while the handsome Hua Qiqiong looked more like a junior. However, the lifespan of a martial practitioner, especially after reaching the Sage Realm, could vary greatly. The length of one's lifespan was not only related to a martial practitioner's realm, but also closely related to a martial practitioner's martial physique, bloodline, and the martial techniques and cultivation methods they cultivated. Thus, some martial practitioners who reached the Sage Realm would look old even though they were only a few 100,000 years old. On the other hand, some people could live for millions of years and still maintain their youthful appearance. The Abyss Ghoul has been in seclusion for a long time. I didn't expect to see them here. Hua Qiqiqyang's eyes were deep, and his tone was a little helpless. It was as if he was saying why the Abyss Ghoul race had to wade into these muddy waters. The time for the Abyss Ghoul race to enter the world has come. Shouldn't Senior Hua Supreme be happy for us? Mu Zhaoquan smiled, but there was an extremely chilling intent hidden in his eyes. He seemed to be telling Hua Qiqiqyang that the Abyss Ghoul race's appearance was already set in stone. No one could stop them or they would die. Since you've already made up your mind, I won't say anything else. Hua Qiqiqyang could, of course, hear the hidden meaning in Mu Zhaoquan's words. He frowned and said, I'm just very curious. Who is the person behind you? Who has the means to stir up the Abyss Ghoul race? Senior Hua Supreme, you're a smart person. You already know the answer, so why bother asking me? Mu Zhaoquan did not answer directly. Instead, he smiled faintly. Hua Qiqiqyang frowned. Mu Zhaoquan's answer confirmed his guess. Make your move. Hua Qiqiqyang did not say anything else. He smiled and said, I also want to see just how strong the Abyss Ghoul race's swordsmen are. You and I both serve different masters, so I'll have to offend you. Mu Zhaoquan's eyes darkened. A strange sword shaped like a long snake appeared in his hand. It was the sword of his Yuan clan, Eight-Branched Demonic Flow. The moment Eight-Branched Demonic Flow was unsheathed, a murderous aura permeated the air. The surrounding space seemed to become tense, making everyone feel an unusual pressure. Your sword essence is indeed extraordinary. Hua Qiqiqyang's expression changed when he felt the sword essence ripple from the void. He could not conceal the shock in his heart. It had to be said that the strength of Mu Zhaoquan's sword essence was beyond his expectations. Hua Qiqiqyang originally thought that even though Mu Zhaoquan was a sword principal expert of the Abyss Ghoul race, his true strength would not be too strong. At the very least, he would be much weaker than Yin Feng Wua, who was also from the Abyss clan. However, the aura of Mu Zhaoquan's sword essence was actually similar to Yin Feng Wua's. Senior, you flatter me. Mu Zhaoquan could see Hua Qiqiqyang's surprise and said, Senior Hua Supreme and Senior Selfless Sword Demon are best friends. I wonder how my sword essence compares to Senior Selfless Sword Demon's? Before Yin Feng achieved one with the sword, your sword essence could still fight against him. But now that he has achieved one with the sword, you are far inferior to him. Hua Qiqiqyang smiled faintly and said loudly. Although Mu Zhaoquan was strong, his sword essence had yet to reach one with the sword. He could only fight against Yin Feng Wua before he achieved one with the sword. However, with Mu Zhaoquan's age and his current sword essence, there was a high chance that he could achieve one with the sword. Then I wonder if my sword essence is enough to kill Senior Hua Supreme? Mu Zhaoquan frowned and asked cold, seemingly disapproving of Hua Qiqiqyang's words. Chapter 45-42. High up in the sky, Mu Zhaoquan stared at Hua Qiqiao. His cold killing intent was uncontrollable. Not enough. Hua Qiqiao's expression did not change in the face of Mu Zhaoquan's arrogance. He only smiled. Is that so? The corner of Mu Zhaoquan's lips curled up into a cold smile. The eight-branched demonic qi in his hand was like a long snake. The icy sword intent was endless and was constantly being released, filling the entire area with an extremely cold, murderous aura. Hua Qiqiao could feel the bone-chilling coldness in the void. He frowned and said, with the murderous intent in this sword intent, you are no weaker than Yin Feng back then. Is that all? Mu Zhaoquan's temperament was very high. He sneered and the eight-branched evil flow swept across the sky. A sword ray suddenly shot out and went straight for Hua Qiqiao. Hua Qiqiao moved his body and easily dodged the sword ray. It was obvious that the sword ray was not meant to kill Hua Qiqiao, but to intimidate him. Mu Zhaoquan was extremely arrogant. He was naturally unhappy that Hua Qiqiao kept comparing him to Yin Feng. He wanted to let Hua Qiqiao know that he was not weaker than the current Yin Feng. Hua Qiqiao was very smart. How could he not know what Mu Zhaokuan was thinking? He smiled and said, "Your sword intent is strong, but it is not a threat to me. The current you is still not on par with Yin Feng." Mu Zhaokuan's eyes were extremely cold. There was a strange change in his pupils. They became much sharper, like a poisonous snake. As his pupils changed, the aura of the sword intent in the air also changed. The sword intent flowed like a cold wind. It had the coldness of a frost blade and the sharpness of a wind blade. It was extremely terrifying. Although Hua Qiqiao's cultivation was at the peak, he could still feel the terrifying sword intent seeping into his skin and bones. It had to be said that Mu Zhaokuan's sword intent was really terrifying. Even an ordinary sky martial divine ancestor would not be able to withstand the pressure of his sword intent. So you are from the eight-branched evil flow. No wonder the murderous intent in your sword intent is so strong. Hua Qiqiao frowned and said in a deep voice. The Orochi clan was one of the top clans in the Abyss bloodline. Moreover, the Orochi clan was very different from the other ghost clans. Not only did their bloodline contain the unique ghost chi of the ghost clans, the Abyss ghost clan's unique abyssal power, and an even more ancient fierce beast chi. According to legend, the ancestor of the Yamata no Orochi was not a human, but a giant Yamata no Orochi with 8 heads. In the end, it obtained a strand of sky origin chi from ancient times and gained a human body, which then gave birth to the Yamata no Orochi. The Orochi clan had a very special and important position in the Abyss, and even in the entire Ghost clan. It was a clan that made people pale at the mention of it. Hua Qiqiong did not realize it just now. He only felt that Mu Zhaokuan's sword chi was extremely murderous and murderous. Now that he sensed the bloodline aura in his sword will, he suddenly realized that Mu Zhaokuan was from the Orochi tribe. I didn't expect the Flower Supreme to be able to see through my identity. Should I feel honored? Mu Zhaokuan's eyes narrowed like 2 slits, looking extremely evil and murderous. Perhaps the one who should feel honored is my true self, to be able to fight with the Orochi lord of the Orochi tribe. Hua Qiqiong's eyes darkened slightly. He raised his hand in the void, and a green longsword appeared in his hand. The sharp aura directly tore through the surrounding sword chi pressure. The crowd could not help but be surprised to see a sword in Hua Qiqiong's hand. No one expected Hua Qiqiong to be a swordsman. In the battle just now, Hua Qiqiong did not use his sword at all. It seemed that he had not revealed his true strength. Now that Hua Qiqiong decided to use his sword against Mu Zhaokuan, it was enough to show Mu Zhaokuan's strength. The one I saw last time was indeed just a sword will clone of his. Nie Tian looked at Mu Zhaokuan's figure in the sky, his eyes trembling slightly as he thought to himself. The strength and aura that Mu Zhaokuan displayed now were completely incomparable to the last time. It was obvious that the one who appeared now was Mu Zhaokuan's true self. Although Nie Tian had already guessed it, the strength that Mu Zhaokuan displayed still shocked him. Among all the swordsmen he had seen before, very few could truly suppress Mu Zhaokuan, apart from the Yang God Sword Emperor and Yin Feng Wua. The 3 swords of the Abyss were indeed very powerful. According to Bingji, Shi and Mu Zhaokuan were not the strongest among the 3 swords of the Abyss. The other person who had yet to appear was the strongest, and he was known as the number 1 swordsman of the Abyss. Based on Mu Zhaokuan and Bingji's strength, the number 1 swordsman's sword principal cultivation was definitely not far from the Yang God and Yin Feng Wua. Moreover, this number 1 swordsman was not the strongest person of the Abyss. In the Eternal Abyss, there were not only experts like the Yuan Emperor, but also many hidden experts of the Li clan. Judging from this, the overall strength of the Abyss was probably not inferior to the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion. If the other 3 bloodlines of the Ghost race were included, the entire Ghost race's strength was probably enough to contend with the Human Emperor's palace. Previously, Nie Tian thought that the Dragon race and the Angel race were already the most powerful races and factions in the All-Heaven Sacred World. He did not expect the ghost race to be even more powerful than these two races. However, these major races had internal strife and endless infighting, so their overall strength was greatly weakened. Nie Tian even felt that the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion or the Human Emperor's Palace were very likely behind Mu Zhaoquan and the Li clan. So Lord Hua Supreme is also a swordsman. I actually failed to see that. How foolish of me. High up in the sky, Mu Zhaoquan's gaze was poisonous as he spoke with a deep murderous intent. However, Hua Qiqiong smiled and said, I haven't used the sword for a long time. I wonder if I'm rusty. Then come. Mu Zhaoquan's eyes darkened. With a low roar, he moved immediately and stabbed out with his sword. The sword force was so strong that it was like 10,000 arrows shooting out at the same time. Within the surging force, the sharpness was evident. Hua Qiqiong's eyes darkened, and the aura around him changed. The green sword in his hand swept through the air, and sword waves surged into the sky. They turned into 9 layers of waves in the air, weakening Mu Zhaoquan's sword force layer by layer. Boom, boom, boom. In the void, muffled explosions sounded continuously. As the sword forces collided, Hua Qiqiong actually took a few steps back, but Mu Zhaoquan was as steady as a mountain and did not move an inch. Judging from the sword force alone, Hua Qiqiong was actually inferior to Mu Zhaoquan. Lord Hua Supreme, be careful. Mu Zhaoquan immediately grasped the opportunity after gaining the upper hand. With a low roar, his body shook in the air, and his sword will burst forth. With a slash of his sword, the void trembled as if it was about to be torn apart. Boom! In the next instant, a huge sword shadow appeared with the force of a landslide, pressing down on Hua Qiqiong. Hua Qiqiong felt the majestic pressure coming from above his head, making it hard for him to breathe. He had to admit that he had underestimated Mu Zhaoquan. The Orochi clan's Lord of Orochi had inherited the power of Orochi, and was indeed unparalleled. However, Hua Qiqiong did not panic. The green longsword in his hand trembled, and a strange scene occurred. The green longsword actually changed color and became a sword of fire that was as red as flames. Chapter 45-43. Fire, Burning Sky. High up in the sky, Hua Qiqiong bellowed and slashed the fire sword in the void. Boundless sword essence of fire surged out and waves of fire filled the sky, burning the heavens and the earth. Bang! Immediately after, a thunderous explosion rang out. 2 extremely powerful forces clashed against each other, causing the entire space to tremble. Waves of energy rolled out in all directions, clashing against each other. Hua Qiqiong was pushed back dozens of meters before he steadied himself. He did not look the least bit flustered. On the other hand, Mu Zhaoquan was still as steady as an old tree, and did not move an inch. There was no doubt that Mu Zhaoquan still had the upper hand in this second clash. However, Hua Qiqiong was not injured and was only pushed back slightly. Mu Zhaoquan frowned when he saw that he had only managed to push Hua Qiqiong back. He stared at the fire sword in Hua Qiqiong's hand. The sword in Hua Qiqiong's hand was green just now. How did it turn into a fire sword in the blink of an eye? This was too strange. Moreover, Mu Zhaoquan sensed that after the sword in Hua Qiqiong's hand turned into a fire sword, the aura of his sword essence also changed completely. The burning aura of fire was extremely strong, like the sun. What's going on? The surrounding people were also shocked by this scene, and they all looked puzzled. Normally, a swordsman's sword would be compatible with his sword essence. After a long period of use, the sword would also integrate with the swordsman's sword essence. In general, the sword was connected with the swordsman, and the aura of the sword essence was very stable. How could the sword in Hua Qiqiong's hand change its aura, and the sword itself was also changing? This was very puzzling. In the central pavilion, Nie Tian was also puzzled. He was a swordsman and understood swords very well, but he had never seen a sword like the one in Hua Qiqiong's hand. Could it be that Lord Hua Supreme's sword is made from the legendary 5 Armageddon steel? Gu Ling Wuji could see something and could not help but exclaim. 5 Armageddon steel? Nie Tian was stunned. He had never heard of this kind of steel. Gu Ling Wuji furrowed his brows and explained in a deep voice, "Legend has it that the Doomsday Metal is a special metal that possesses the 5 attributes of metal: wood, water, fire, and earth. Therefore, weapons made from the Doomsday Metal can possess the 5 attributes at the same time. Furthermore, they can freely switch between the 5 attributes." Nie Tian nodded. It seemed that the sword in Hua Qiqiao's hand could change its attribute at will. This sword isn't made from the Doomsday 5 June metal. It should be his elemental spirit sword. Little Fat Cat's voice rang out and said solemnly, "Yuan Ling's sword?" Nie Tian frowned and was surprised again. If the sword in Hua Qiqiong's hand was the sword of his primordial spirit, didn't that mean that his primordial spirit was of the 5 elements? An essence spirit of the 5 elements was something that was extremely rare. In fact, Nie Tian had also seen martial artists with the 5 elements. Even among his disciples there was such a martial artist. However, he did not come across any more cultivators of the 5 elements after coming to the Saints' world. Yes. Fat Cat nodded and paused before saying carefully, "If I'm not mistaken, this person should have the body of the 5 virtues." The body of the 5 virtues? Nie Tian's gaze changed slightly and he almost cried out in surprise. The body of the 5 virtues was an extremely rare innate martial body. Martial artists with such a martial body would merge the 5 elements of the earth into their body. They originated from the 5 elements, but they were also above the 5 elements. Legend had it that those who possessed the body of the 5 virtues could cultivate the true body of the 5 virtues that penetrated the heavens and earth. In the end, they would possess an immortal body and an indestructible soul. In the past, when he was chatting with Fat Cat had told Nie Tian about some extremely powerful innate martial bodies. The body of the 5 virtues was an innate martial body that was comparable to the body of an innate saint. Nie Tian never thought that the ordinary-looking Hua Qiqiao would possess the legendary body of the 5 virtues. From the looks of it, the strength that Hua Qiqiao had displayed was far from his limit. I didn't expect Lord Hua Qiqiao to have such skills. It's really an eye-opener for me. Mu Zhaoquan calmed down and spoke in a deep voice. His eyes never left the sword in Hua Qiqiao's hand. Against the Lord of Orochi who possesses the 8-branched force, I naturally have to show some of my true abilities. Hua Qiqiao smiled faintly and shook the longsword in his hand. It changed color again and was now a dark black. At the same time, the aura of the dark black sword changed completely. A vast and boundless majestic force surged out and the void seemed to be surging with 1,000 layers of raging waves. Water element. Mu Zhaoquan could not help but exclaim in surprise when he sensed the change in the sword aura in the void. In the beginning, Hua Qiqiao's sword seemed to be of the wood element, then the fire element, and now it was of the water element. Could it be that his sword possessed the 5 elements? X8-inch rumor has it that the Lord of Orochi can cultivate the power of 8 elements at the same time. Hua Qiqiao looked at Mu Zhaoquan and smiled faintly. "Since you're the Lord of Orochi and have inherited the 8-branched force, you should be a swordsman with multiple elements, right?" The Supremes of the Orochi were known as the Lords of Orochi. They inherited the 8-branched force that the Orochi had guarded for generations. I didn't expect Lord Hua Qiqiao to be so familiar with the Orochi. Mu Zhaoquan laughed, but his eyes were clearly surging with an extremely cold, murderous intent. The Orochi had been in seclusion with the abyss for a long time. The world had almost forgotten about this once glorious and powerful aristocratic family. However, Hua Qiqiao knew the Orochi very well. This made Mu Zhaoquan want to kill him. The secrets of the Orochi would always belong to them. How could they allow outsiders to pry into their secrets? Hee. Hua Qiqiao could naturally sense Mu Zhaoquan's murderous intent, but he was not bothered. He smiled faintly. When I was young, I met the previous Lord of Orochi a few times and was fortunate enough to fight him. That's why I know a little about the eight-branched force. Impossible. Mu Zhaoquan's eyes darkened when he heard Hua Qiqiao's words. He said coldly, Lord Hua Qiqiao might be able to scare others, but how can you scare me? Hua Qiqiao smiled again and said, the Lord of Orochi must inherit the eight-branched force. However, the eight-branched force is too strong, so for a long time, the position of the Lord of Orochi was empty. The previous Lord of Orochi should be a genius of the Orochi from 4 million years ago, right? Since you know, why bother lying to me? Mu Zhaoquan's eyes flickered and he replied coldly. The previous Lord of Orochi was indeed someone from 4 million years ago. Although Hua Qiqiao was an expert at the peak of the sky martial arts realm, his lifespan could not reach 4 million years. In theory, the lifespan of an expert of the sky martial arts realm should be 6 million years. However, in reality, the lifespan of most sky martial arts realm saint ancestors was around 1 or 2 million years. This was because almost every sky martial arts realm saint ancestor had experienced countless battles. Their martial bodies were more or less injured, so it was difficult for them to reach the theoretical limit of their lifespan. Moreover, even if they were sky martial arts realm saint ancestors, their qi and blood would gradually weaken as they grew older. However, not only did Hua Qiqiao look young, but his vitality and qi of vitality had not weakened at all. It was obvious that he was still in his prime. With his age, how could he have met the previous Lord of Orochi? Miao Shu Wu. Chapter 45-44. As the current Orochi venerate, Mu Zhaoquan was very familiar with the history of the Orochi tribe. Naturally, he would not believe Hua Qiqiong's words. Based on his observation, although Hua Qiqiong was a senior of the ghost tribe, he should be around 2 million years old. How could a 2-million-year-old person have any connection with a person from 4 million years ago? Come on, let me experience the true power of the Orochi tribe again. Hua Qiqiong smiled but did not explain much. Instead, he placed his sword behind his back and said coldly, As you wish. Mu Zhaoquan's eyes were dark and cold. Then, he took a step forward and the aura around him changed. It was a completely different and majestic aura. Like a rolling wave, it spread out and instantly covered a radius of more than 100,000 meters. Whoosh! In an instant, an invisible aura spread out like a shield, covering everything within a radius of more than 100,000 meters. What a terrifying aura! Everyone's expression changed when they felt the unparalleled majestic aura. They could not hide the shock in their hearts. Compared to before, Mu Zhaoquan's aura had increased by several times. It seemed that Mu Zhaoquan had not used his full strength before. This was his true strength. Evil flow, forbidden realm. Nie Tian's eyes couldn't help but tremble slightly when he sensed the aura circulating in the air. He couldn't help but exclaim. He was very sure that Mu Zhaoquan had directly activated his bloodline boundary, the evil flow forbidden realm. Previously, Nie Tian, Devil's Knight, and Bing Xie were also trapped in the evil flow forbidden realm. Bing Xie was seriously injured and Nie Tian almost died. However, at that time, they were only facing Mu Zhaoquan's sword intent clone. This time, it was the power of Mu Zhaoquan's main body. Therefore, the aura of the evil flow forbidden realm was completely different from before. So, this is the real evil flow sword, Mu Zhaoquan. Nie Tian took a deep breath and calmed down. However, his eyes were trembling, and he was clearly worried about Hua Qiqiong. Originally, he was very confident in Hua Qiqiong. After all, the latter had the legendary body of 5 virtues. However, facing Mu Zhaoquan's evil flow forbidden realm, Hua Qiqiong would not be relaxed. I didn't expect this person to be so capable. I'm afraid Lord Supreme Flower is in trouble. Gu Ling Wuji's eyes were trembling as he said in a deep voice. As a world spiritist, He was able to sense how terrifying Mu Zhaoquan's evil flow forbidden formation was. In fact, he had never seen such a terrifying bloodline spirit formation before. He really didn't expect Mu Zhaoquan to be so terrifying. The power of Orochi is indeed powerful. Hua Qiqiong sensed an oppressive force from the void that was actually suppressing the eruption of his sword intent. However, he only frowned and said, "However, if I'm not mistaken, what you've unleashed is still not the complete power of the eight-branched serpent. It's enough to kill you." Mu Zhaoquan shouted in a low voice. Killing intent erupted from all over his body, and Orochi furiously slashed out in the void. Amidst the billowing sword intent, a majestic sword shadow appeared, like an endless mountain, pressing down on Hua Qiqiong. Hua Qiqiao immediately felt an endless pressure coming from above his head. The long sword in his hand trembled in the air again and turned golden. He swung it in the air, and immediately, the surging sword bloomed like the scorching sun, forming several golden halos in the void, surging like ripples. Boom! 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 Suddenly, the majestic sword shadow fell, but it was blocked by layers of halos and sword intent, and its momentum gradually weakened. When it finally fell, it could not threaten Hua Qiqiong at all, and only forced him to retreat dozens of meters. Mu Zhaoquan's attack was blocked by Hua Qiqiong in such a way. He couldn't help but frown, and the killing intent around him intensified. Even his eyes were bloodshot. "Revered Orochi, don't tell me you think you can defeat me with just this kind of power?" Hua Qiqiong lightly stepped on the ground, and his body was as light as the wind, leaving behind several afterimages in the air. "How is this possible? You're completely unaffected by the evil flow forbidden boundary." Mu Zhaoquan sensed that Hua Qiqiong's aura was different, and his face darkened as he shouted cold. He couldn't believe that Hua Qiqiong was completely unaffected by his evil flow forbidden boundary. His speed, strength, and even his sword intent were not weakened at all. But how was this possible? The evil flow forbidden boundary was his bloodline boundary, and it was infused with the eight-branched force, so its power was extremely terrifying. If an ordinary sky martial ancestor was trapped in the evil flow forbidden boundary, they would have difficulty breathing, let alone fighting. But Hua Qiqiong was completely unaffected, and that was too strange. What kind of power did Hua Qiqiong have to be able to resist the power of the evil flow forbidden boundary? Although the eight-branched force is strong, it's not invincible. Hua Qiqiong smiled and said, "If you could release the complete eight-branched force, I would naturally be afraid. But it's a pity that you can't control the complete eight-branched force with your current strength." "Is that so?" Mu Zhaoquan was thoroughly enraged. With a roar, his body trembled, and a natural aura was released. Then, a terrifying power condensed around his body. It turned out to be a gigantic black serpent that was 10,000 meters long. Boom! The moment the black serpent appeared, a terrifying aura surged out and filled the air, as if it wanted to split the sky and earth. Hua Qiqiao frowned, his expression darkening as he exclaimed in surprise, "Eight-limbed real form." He had never imagined that Mu Zhaoquan could condense the eight-branch true form without fully controlling the power of eight-branch true form. It was said that the ancestor of the Yamata no Serpent was an Yamata no Serpent. The Orochi real body that Mu Zhaoquan condensed was the shadow of this Orochi. When the crowd saw Mu Zhaoquan condensing the eight limitless true body, their expressions changed. How can this person be so strong? What kind of power did he release? I'm afraid that even experts like the 5 great deans might not be able to achieve such terrifying strength. Just who was this guy? His cultivation was at the peak of the all heavens. The crowd was shocked and looked at the huge snake in the sky in disbelief. At this moment, even Gu Ling Wuji was stunned. He gasped and was speechless. Nye Tian was barely able to remain calm, but the worry in his eyes was becoming more and more obvious. Of course, He knew that the reason why Hua Qiqiao was not affected by the evil flow Forbidden Realm was because of his body of 5 virtues. However, against the 8-branched true form, how long could Hua Qiqiao's body of 5 virtues last? Lord Hua Supreme, is this power enough to kill you? Mu Zhaoquan's voice exploded in the sky in the evil flow Forbidden Realm. The aura of the 8-branched true form was enough to shake the heavens. Not enough. The corner of Hua Qiqiao's mouth twitched as he uttered those 3 words. Chapter 45-45. In the face of Mu Zhaoquan's Orochi real form, Hua Qiqiong was only slightly surprised. He did not panic at all. Lord Hua, I admit that you're extremely powerful, but don't you think you're a little too confident? Mu Zhaoquan's eyes were extremely gloomy. The Orochi real form outside his body swayed slightly, and the surrounding void trembled violently. It was as if its every move could overturn heaven and earth. Such a terrifying power was indeed rare in the world. Come on. Hua Qiqiong smiled faintly, still full of confidence. You're courting death. Mu Zhaoquan's eyes were vicious. Hua Qiqiong's nonchalant expression had completely infuriated him. Boom. In the next instant the Orochi real form moved, and the surrounding heaven and earth shook. The gigantic serpent's body rolled out, bringing with it the power to destroy everything as it pressed down on Hua Qiqiong. Hua Qiqiong could not help but frown as he felt the terrifying pressure. Under the pressure of this terrifying pressure, the space around him seemed to have been sealed, making it impossible for him to dodge. Looks like I've underestimated the Orochi real form. Hua Qiqiong did not panic at all. He only smiled bitterly and waved the long sword in his hand. Several agile sword essences gushed out, and the sharp chi tore through the void and headed straight for the Orochi. Boom! Then, a muffled sound exploded in the void. Hua Qiqiong's body was forced back hundreds of meters, and he could not even stand straight from the forceful impact. Everyone looked at the scene in the sky and could not help but gasp in unison. Their expressions were one of disbelief. No one expected Mu Zhaoquan's strength to be so powerful. However, in the next moment, everyone saw that there were several sword marks on the head of the Orochi, making it look even more ferocious. It turned out that Hua Qiqiong had also injured Mu Zhaoquan's Orochi real form. However, the Orochi's aura did not diminish at all. In fact, it increased by quite a bit, and the huge serpent's body pounced over again. Sword essences gushed out from Hua Qiqiong's body, breaking through the void. He moved like lightning and avoided the direct impact, but the aftermath of the huge serpent's body in the void still caused a great impact on him, causing him to lose his balance in the air. Swoosh! At this moment, a sharp sword energy whistled through the air. Before Hua Qiqiong could react, it left a horrifying bloody wound on his left shoulder. Instantly, blood gushed out like a fountain and dyed half of his body red. It's over! Upon seeing this, Mu Zhaoquan let out a low roar. The Yamata no Orochi's speed instantly increased by several times as if it had grown a pair of wings. Compared to its huge body, it was already inconceivably fast, and directly pounced towards Hua Qiqiong. The bloody mouth was like a black hole, as if it wanted to devour and annihilate everything. Be careful! When the surrounding people saw this scene, they subconsciously exclaimed. Their nerves were stretched taut, and even their breathing seemed to have stopped. The power of the Yamata no Orochi was extremely powerful. If this attack landed, Hua Qiqiong would not be able to dodge it. Even if he did not die, he would be gravely injured. Nie Tian and Gu Lingwuji were even more nervous to the extreme. They only felt that every part of their body was tensed up, and their blood was surging non-stop. At this moment, Hua Qiqiong merely furrowed his brows. Then, he held the long sword in his hand vertically in front of him and drew a line on the blade with his finger. A 5-colored ray of light appeared and instantly enveloped his entire body. Then, like a Buddhist lotus, it rapidly bloomed. The 5-colored ray of light emitted halos and ripples spread out. 1 turned into 10, 10 turned into 100, 100 turned into 1,000, and 1,000 turned into 10,000. It seemed to be endless. Rumble. At this moment, the Yamata no Orochi descended, but its huge body was blocked by the five-colored ray of light. A tearing sound came from the void, followed by a terrifying squeezing sound. The Yamata no Orochi's strength could shake the heavens, but under the five-colored ray of light, it could not advance even an inch. How is this possible? Mu Zhaoquan was stunned by the scene in front of him and immediately shouted. He could not believe his eyes. Hua Qiqiong actually used the seemingly insignificant five-colored ray of light to directly block the Yamata no Orochi's attack. What was that five-colored ray of light? What kind of power did it contain? How could it possibly block the Yamata no Orochi? Venerable Orochi, if you think that the power of the Yamata no Orochi is invincible, then you are underestimating the people of the world. Hua Qiqiong took a step forward and his figure soared into the sky like a long rainbow, forcing the Yamata no Orochi to retreat. Outside his body, the five-colored ray of light was constantly changing, like the auspicious clouds, unpredictable and unpredictable. The five-colored ray of light was extremely mysterious. It seemed soft and gentle, but it contained a terrifying power. What kind of power is this? Mu Zhaoquan was indeed an expert who had experienced hundreds of battles. He quickly calmed down and asked coldly. His eyes darkened. Five virtues, holy light. Hua Qiqiong smiled faintly and his aura rose again. His body shone with the five-colored ray of light, and a lotus flower opened the sky. Space-time cracks appeared in the void, and a violent space-time storm rushed out, causing the entire evil flow forbidden boundary to tremble and show signs of collapse. This, Mu Zhaoquan clearly did not expect Hua Qiqiong to be so powerful. His pupils shrank involuntarily, and he was momentarily speechless. Venerable Orochi, you and I are both from the Ghost Clan, and I was friends with the previous Venerable Orochi. How about you surrender now, and this battle will end here? Hua Qiqiong's eyes darkened as he spoke in a loud voice. He was like a deity descending to the mortal world, majestic and unassailable. Venerable Hua, aren't you underestimating me too much by asking me to surrender? Mu Zhaoquan's eyes turned cold, as if he had made up his mind about something. He said coldly, "Do you think the power of the Yamata no Orochi is limited to this?" Hua Qiqiong frowned. He immediately realized something and asked in shock, "What are you trying to do?" "I'll let you witness the true power of the Yamata no Orochi." Mu Zhaoquan's eyes were cold and murderous. As soon as he finished speaking, his body suddenly shook, and blood qi gushed out from his body. The bloody aura filled the sky, and the surrounding void trembled continuously. "Are you crazy?" Hua Qiqiong suddenly understood something. He growled and instinctively retreated. He never thought that Mu Zhaoquan would burn the power of his bloodline to activate the power of the Yamata no Orochi for this battle. From Hua Qiqiong's point of view, this was just a battle. The outcome was not important, so why would he fight with his life on the line? Unfortunately, Mu Zhaoquan did not think so. Rumble. As Mu Zhaoquan released his blood qi, the void rumbled endlessly. The heaven and earth shook as if the end of the world had arrived. And at this moment an incomparably strange scene happened. Under the watchful eyes of countless people, the head of the Yamata no Orochi shook slightly and grew a second head. Everyone was dumbfounded by this scene. They stared blankly at the sky, and the shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. Then an even stranger scene appeared. After the Yamata no Orochi grew two heads, it changed again. 2 became 4, 4 became 8, and a total of 8 snake heads were born. This was the original appearance of the Yamata no Orochi, 8 heads devouring the sky. Chapter 45-46. High up in the sky, Orochi revealed its original appearance. Its 8 mountain-like heads roared and swallowed the wind and thunder. It was extremely violent and its momentum could shake the heavens. Everyone stared blankly at the scene in the sky. The shock they felt was indescribable. No one had expected Mu Zhaoquan's power to be so terrifying. His aura was comparable to that of a true pinnacle existence in the heavens. However, in the face of the complete body of Yamada no Orochi, Hua Qiqiao merely furrowed his brows and did not show any signs of fear. Until this moment, he still had absolute confidence. I didn't expect you to be able to condense the complete form of Orochi. I have to admit that your current strength has already surpassed the previous Lord of Orochi. Hua Qiqiong frowned slightly and said in an indifferent tone, however, although your Orochi is complete, it only has the form but not the spirit. It's rare for Lord Hua to still be so confident even at this moment. Mu Zhaoquan's eyes were bloodshot. Hua Qiqiong's calm demeanor made him feel as if there was a fishbone stuck in his throat. He could not swallow it nor spit it out, and it was very uncomfortable. However, all of this was about to end. He absolutely did not believe that Hua Qiqiong could fight against the complete form of Orochi. Although Hua Qiqiong was right that Mu Zhaoquan's Orochi had the form, it could not unleash its true power. However, Mu Zhaoquan believed that Orochi was extremely powerful. Even in this form, it was not something that Hua Qiqiong could fight against. Then bring it on. Hua Qiqiong's expression was still indifferent. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, and the five-colored light around him changed slightly. It vaguely took on a misty state, and it looked a little strange. As you wish, Mu Zhaoquan said in a low voice. Without hesitation, he took a step forward and the Orochi's true form tumbled down from the void. The enormous power set off waves that were tens of thousands of feet high, and the heavens and earth wailed under the pressure. At this moment, a terrifying shock wave spread out in all directions. The surrounding people felt the powerful aura in the void and used their strength to resist it. The few peaks of the Fengtian sect nearby could not withstand the force and shook violently as if they were about to collapse. Fortunately, with the suppression of the Heaven Beacon stone statue, the mountain gate could still be stabilized. However, some of the peaks of the Heaven Beacon mountain range in the distance were unable to withstand the terrifying power without the protection of the Heaven Beacon statues and formations. For a moment it was as if the heavens were collapsing and the earth was collapsing. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes, unable to conceal the nervousness in his heart. He didn't expect Mu Zhaoquan's power to be so terrifying. Although Hua Qiqiao was the evil lord, could he really withstand a strike from the complete Orochi? As of now, Nie Tian had not seen any power from Hua Qiqiong that could resist the complete Orochi. However, Hua Qiqiao's calmness revealed that he still had trump cards that he had yet to reveal. Boom! At the same time, the Orochi unleashed its majestic power. The 8 heads looked down at the same time, and 8 terrifying forces whistled out and converged in the air, forming a chaotic vortex. It moved as fast as a meteor and pressed down on Hua Qiqiao. End of the 5 virtues, the way of the saints. Hua Qiqiao frowned as he murmured something. He had no intention of dodging, but he continued to walk forward step by step. Whoosh! Hua! Hua! As he stepped forward, a 5-colored radiance bloomed under his feet with every step he took. It was like a lotus seal that shone in all directions. Moreover, with every step Hua Qiqiao took, the 5-colored radiance under his feet grew brighter. When he took his 7th step, it was as if there was a blazing sun under his feet. The radiance was so bright that it engulfed his entire body, and no one dared to look at it directly. Boom! In the next moment, the 5-colored radiance bloomed in all directions and directly collided with the blade of chaos. There was a roar in the void, and the chaotic power of the Orochi started to burn like a tragic meteor streaking across the atmosphere. How is this possible? Mu Zhaoquan's eyes reflected a scarlet flame. He looked at the Orochi in disbelief, as if he was witnessing the most terrifying scene in his life. He had experienced countless battles and countless life-and-death situations in his life, but those were nothing compared to the scene in front of him. As the lord of the Orochi, he had always hidden his Orochi power and bided his time in front of others, never revealing too much of his power. Everyone in the abyss believed that the strongest among the 3 swords of the abyss was the 7 cruel sword, Doguji. However, Mu Zhaoquan was confident that he was not weaker than Doguji. Mu Zhaoquan admitted that he might not be the strongest swordsman in the abyss, but he had a higher chance of winning if he were to fight to the death against Doguji. Now, the Orochi power that he had hidden the deepest and proudest secret in his life was blocked by Hua Qiqiao. How could he not be shocked, aghast, and fearful? Even though Hua Qiqiao was known as the evil lord, Mu Zhaoquan only respected him on the surface. He never thought that the former had the ability to defeat him. However, Hua Qiqiao was tearing his confidence apart bit by bit, just like how he was stepping on his dignity. Just as Hua Qiqiao had said, he had underestimated the people of the world. At that moment the Orochi flame approached Hua Qiqiao, but it was like an arrow at the end of its flight. At the last moment, it dissipated in front of Hua Qiqiao. Yin and Yang, 5 elements unite. Then, Hua Qiqiao's voice sounded like the judgment of fate. When it fell into Mu Zhaoquan's ears, he felt like he had fallen into an abyss. Swoosh! In the next moment, a 5-colored light swept across the sky. It was so dazzling that it felt like a lifetime had passed. 7 steps to sever the snake. Then, the corner of Hua Qiqiao's mouth twitched and he uttered these words. Almost at the same time, the 5-colored light disappeared in a flash. The 8 heads of the Orochi were all chopped off. The Orochi power dissipated with the wind. After a while, the void was silent. Only the sound of the wind whistling could be heard, but it was filled with a sharp aura. The 5 virtues end and beginning, the way of the sage. Yin and Yang, 5 elements unite. 7 steps to sever the snake. The light around Hua Qiqiao dissipated. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking aloof and peerless. Mu Zhaoquan's body was badly mutilated, as if his skin had been peeled off. His body trembled incessantly, but his eyes flickered with surprise. His lips trembled slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Venerable Orochi, it's over. Hua Qiqiao's eyes were as cold as frost. His faint voice sounded as if he was sighing about something. Mu Zhaoquan's mouth twitched. He used the last bit of his strength to shout a word, but he could not say the rest. In the next moment, his body trembled, and he finally lost his last breath of life. He fell straight to the ground like a withered leaf. The first venerable Orochi of the Orochi tribe had lost his life. Chapter 45-47. High up in the sky, the wind was calm and the clouds were quiet. However, there was a strong murderous aura quietly spreading. Hua's 7 orifices stood alone in the void. His solitary figure was out of this world. He was one of the 4 great evil lords of the Ghost Clan, yet he was able to remain calm in the face of Lord Orochi. He fused the power of Yin and Yang and the 5 elements to execute the snake in 7 steps. Hua Qiqiao truly lived up to his name as the evil lord. Countless gazes in the surroundings focused on the figure. The shock in their hearts could not be any greater. This person is so strong. 7 steps snake executioner. Such power has likely surpassed those apex all heavens expert. That Lord Orochi was also a true powerhouse. It's a pity that he met Lord Supreme Flower. I can only say that he has no regrets even if he dies. The crowd began to whisper among themselves as they looked at Hua Qiqiao with even more respect and caution. However, at this moment, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as if he had noticed something. He couldn't help but become nervous. Supreme Flower has exhausted too much of his power. I'm afraid he won't be able to fight anymore. Gu Ling Wuji also sensed that Hua Qiqiao's aura was weakening and said in a deep voice, "Yes." Nie Tian nodded solemnly and did not say anything else. He could already tell that Hua Qiqiao did not expend too much energy, but it was because of the backlash from the body of 5 virtues. Almost all powerful forces in the world had varying degrees of backlash, and the stronger the force, the greater the backlash. Just like Rui Qianyu's 9 colored pupils, even after she had awakened the 10 annihilations of the evil woman, the 9 colored pupils still gave her a lot of pressure. In fact, every time Nie Tian's godfiend body was activated, it would cause backlash to his martial body. However, Nie Tian's martial body was already strong, and with the addition of the 10th meridian, the backlash would quickly recover. However, Hua Qiqiao did not have a strong martial body. In addition to activating the body of 5 virtues, he had also integrated the power of yin and yang. That was why he could achieve the magnificent feat of killing the snake in 7 steps. But now, the Flower 7 Aperture's martial body had suffered a backlash and was already very weak, unable to continue fighting. Supreme Flower, you've done enough, Nie Tian thought to himself. Without any hesitation, he leaped into the air and arrived beside Hua Qiqiao. Nie Tian, I'm fine. Although Hua Qiqiao was very weak, he was still holding on with a smile on his face. Senior Supreme Flower, please come down and rest. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He placed his palm on Hua Qiqiao's back and sent a stream of life force into the latter's body. Hua Qiqiao knew that Nie Tian had seen through his condition, and his expression was slightly awkward. He thought for a moment and decided not to force the issue. He nodded and prepared to go to the central pavilion to rest. Evil Lord of the Ghost Clan, are you ready to enter the stage now? But at this moment, a thunderous voice rang out. Then, a transcendent aura appeared in the sky and descended like a meteor. After this figure descended, the void was filled with a thunderous aura. The dazzling light made it impossible to see the figure's face clearly. Hua Qiqiao frowned. His third eye appeared on his forehead again, and he unleashed a blade of eye force that tore through the lightning in the sky. In the next moment, the thunder subsided slightly, and a figure slowly walked out. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and he was a middle-aged, elegant man. Brother Hua, long time no see. The elegant man's face was extremely handsome, and he was not inferior to Hua Qiqiao in any way. His eyes were bright and deep, and they were locked onto Hua Qiqiao from afar. There was a hint of oppression in his calm tone, but it was as if he was greeting an old friend that he had not seen in a long time. Fang Junxian. Hua Qiqiao called out the elegant man's name when he saw his face clearly. He had never panicked before. Even when facing Mu Zhaoquan's 8-branch true body, Hua Qiqiao did not panic at all. Why was he panicking when he saw Fang Junxian? Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed as he had a bad premonition. Although Fang Junxian's aura was not strong, Nie Tian had a feeling that this person's strength was definitely in the top 10 of all the experts he had met. Moreover, from Hua Qiqiao's reaction, Fang Junxian's strength was not to be underestimated. Hua Qiqiao seemed to be very familiar with Fang Junxian, but he did not know the latter's identity. It's been so long since we parted in a hurry. Fang Junxian smiled faintly. His voice was pleasant to the ear, but there was a hint of vicissitudes and calmness in it. I didn't expect that after so many years, Brother Hua's demeanor is still the same as before. Fang Junxian, tell me why you're here. Hua Qiqiao naturally knew that Fang Junxian was not here to reminisce, so he did not beat around the bush and spoke directly. Fang Junxian frowned and suddenly turned to Nie Tian with a smile. You're indeed not simple to be able to escape from the Pavilion Master. Nie Tian's face sank when he heard the words Pavilion Master, and his heart trembled violently. The Pavilion Master that Fang Junxian mentioned should be the Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. Could it be that Fang Junxian was from the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion? You're here for Nie Tian? Although Hua Qiqiao had his guesses, Fang Junxian's reaction still surprised him. This is my duty, so I have to do it. Fang Junxian nodded slightly and said in a low voice. Then your opponent will be me. Hua Kikikio's eyes narrowed as he took a step forward and shielded Nie Tian behind him. Although he was almost exhausted, he had no choice but to fight. Nie Tian was too weak to fight Fang Junxian. Brother Hua, forgive me for being blunt, but you can't even withstand a single blow from me. Fang Junxian seemed a little helpless as he spoke in a low voice. This is my duty, so I have to fight. Hua Kikikiko's eyes trembled as he replied firmly. Since Yin Fenghua had entrusted Nie Tian to him, it was his duty to protect Nie Tian. Even if he had to lose his life, he would not hesitate. Senior Hua Kikikio, you. Nie Tian was moved by the determination in Hua Kikikiko's eyes, but he did not know what to say. The two of them had never met before, and their only connection was Yin Fenghua, yet Hua Kikikiko was willing to risk his life for him. Nie Tian would forever remember this kindness. I'm fine. Hua Kikikiko smiled and looked at Fang Junxian proudly. Come on, let me see how strong the sacred protector of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion is. Nie Tian's eyes trembled. So Fang Junxian was the sacred protector of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. No wonder he was so strong. Brother Hua, why are you doing this? Fang Junxian frowned helplessly. Once upon a time, he and Hua Kikikiko were insignificant. Although they were not close friends, they were good friends. But now, they had to fight for their own master. Hua Kikikiko's eyes were resolute as he stepped forward. He was prepared for the worst. A sacred protector of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Protector actually has to fight with someone so heavily injured. Isn't it a little embarrassing? However, at that moment, laughter rang out in the sky. It was a playful laughter. Why don't you let me experience the strength of the Heavenly Law Divine Protectors? Chapter 45-48. Fang Junxian could not help but frown when he heard the sudden playful laughter, but he soon smiled and said, Friend, since you're already here, why don't you show yourself? Fang Junxian appeared calm on the surface, but deep down, he was feeling uneasy. He did not notice that someone was closing in on him. While he was not a perception-type martial artist, the fact that the other party was able to approach him without him noticing showed that the other party's strength was extraordinary. This aura, is it you? Hua Qiqiong muttered to himself with a frown as if he was surprised. Lord Divine Protector, I'm right behind you. Just as Fang Junxian finished speaking, a mocking voice rang out once more. Fang Junxian's face darkened as he felt a chilling aura. His heart skipped a beat. Swoosh. In the next moment, before Fang Junxian could react, a streak of sword chi flashed past him and left a glaring sword mark on his cheek. Fang Junxian's face darkened. Despite being a seasoned veteran, he could not help but feel enraged. A sword mark was a great humiliation to any martial artist, not to mention a heavenly sacred protector like him. Boom! Fang Junxian abruptly turned around and a powerful aura erupted from his body. Like a volcano erupting, the aura spread out in all directions, causing the heavens and earth to rumble as if they were on the verge of collapsing. Hua Qiqiong's expression flickered as he sensed the oppressive force. He took a step forward and shielded Nie Tian behind him. Bang! With a muffled sound, Hua Qiqiong retreated rapidly. However, Nie Tian hid behind him and was not injured at all. Senior Hua Supreme, are you all right? Nie Tian asked hurriedly as he felt Hua Kikikion's blood surging and the aura in his body becoming chaotic. Before Hua Kikikiong could reply, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as white as a sheet. Nie Tian was shocked. He immediately activated his 10th vital meridian and poured life energy into Hua Kikikiong's body in an attempt to stabilize the chaotic aura in his body. Pooh! However, he didn't expect that the berserk aura would be so violent. It suddenly exploded and actually sent him flying back several meters. After staggering, he spat out a mouthful of dirty blood. Immediately, Hua Qiqiao's expression changed drastically. His handsome facial features contorted into a hideous grimace. It was obvious that he was suffering from qi deviation. Senior. Seeing this scene, Nie Tian's heart jumped to his throat. With a low shout, he charged over. Hua Qi was in a frenzy. He had clearly lost control of himself. If he couldn't control himself, his soul would be possessed by the devil, or he would die on the spot. Boom. However, as soon as Nie Tian got close, a violent force erupted from Hua Qiqiao's body and forced him back. Oh no! Nie Tian barely managed to stabilize himself, and his expression changed drastically. At this moment, a third eye appeared on Hua Qiqiao's forehead. Clearly, he had completely lost control of his power. In the nick of time, a powerful sword essence came crashing down and forcefully forced Hua Qiqiao to retreat repeatedly. Almost at the same time, a figure appeared in the sky. With a point of a finger, a powerful sword intent surged out and pierced into Hua Qiqiao's third eye. Hua Qiqiao's body trembled, and he fainted. The figure caught Hua Qiqiao and came to Nie Tian's side. Thank you, Senior. Receiving Hua Qiqiao, Nie Tian saw that the other party was an old man with white hair and a beard. He quickly bowed to express his gratitude. But in his heart, he was puzzled. Who exactly was this old man that suddenly appeared, and why did he lend a hand? His aura has stabilized, but he's temporarily unconscious. The old man smiled faintly, then raised his head and locked his eyes on Fang Junxian. Lord Sacred Protector, you have quite a temper. Fang Junxian frowned, then regained his composure. I heard that when the abyss secluded itself into the eternal abyss, Elder Wan Jian also went into seclusion. After Elder Wan Jian went into seclusion, he accepted 3 talented disciples from the abyss. After Elder Wan Jian passed away, these 3 disciples grew to become the strongest swordsmen in the abyss, and they are known as the 3 swords of the abyss. Your sword Dao has reached perfection, and you have the aura of the abyss. You must be one of the 3 swords of the abyss. If I'm not wrong, you must be the strongest of the 3 swords of the abyss, 7 remnant sword Duguji. Killing intent surged in Fang Juanxian's eyes as he said this. Duguji. Nie Tian's eyes widened when he heard this name. He had heard from Bing Ji and the others that the strongest of the 3 swords of the abyss was 7 remnant sword Duguji, known as the number 1 swordsman of the abyss. Before Bing Ji left, she promised Nie Tian that she would find someone to protect the Feng Tian sect in her place. Now, it seemed that this person was most likely 7 remnant sword Duguji. Lord Divine Protector rarely leaves the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion, yet you have such a deep understanding of the abyss. You are truly thoughtful. Duguji nodded with a smile. Ha! Fang Junxian smiled. Before I came, the pavilion master told me to pay special attention to a few people in the sacred world of 7 cultivators. You are one of them. Oh! Duguji laughed. It's rare for the pavilion master to think so highly of me. Shouldn't I feel honored? The pavilion master has always been generous to the experts of the world. If Mr. Dugu doesn't mind, you can follow me back to the sacred pavilion and discuss martial arts with the pavilion master. Wouldn't that be great? Fang Junxian said loudly. I appreciate the pavilion master and divine protector's good intentions. Duguji could tell that Fang Junxian was trying to rope him in. It's just that I'm getting old and don't want to leave this place anymore. Mr. Dugu, this is an invitation from the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. Are you really not going to consider it? Fang Junxian's face darkened and his tone turned cold. Forget it, I can't accept the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion's good intentions. Duguji's lips twitched. His eyes were filled with determination. So you're saying that we can only fight? Fang Junxian's face darkened and he made no attempt to hide his threat. If Lord Divine Protector wishes to fight, I will accompany you to the end. Duguqian smiled faintly. Sword aura surrounded him, and he seemed to have transformed into a different person, extremely sharp. Come on then. Fang Junxian's pupils constricted abruptly while his last trace of patience had been completely worn away. He stopped concealing anything and took a step forward. A surging aura erupted from him, and it charged forward to the point. Space in the surroundings shook, the weather dimmed, and the sun and moon dimmed. Nie Tian's heart skipped a beat when he saw Fang Juanxian's aura. Fang Juanxian's aura was no weaker than the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion Masters. "Come on." Duguji responded proudly and took a step forward. His sword intent tore through the sky and left a sharp ray of light in the air. What a powerful sword intent! Nie Tian's face changed and he could not help but feel his blood boiling. Duguji's sword intent was no weaker than Yin Feng's. Chapter 45-49. Nie Tian had not expected Duguji's sword intent to be so strong that it was almost on par with Yin Fenghua. But Duguji had clearly not reached the realm of one with the sword. This meant that his potential was greater than Yin Fenghua's. The crowd was also shocked by the auras of the two men in the sky. They stared at them in disbelief. No one had expected that the battle that Fang Jin had instigated would turn out like this. At the start, it had only been a battle between ordinary experts. But now, it had become a battle between apex experts. Duguji and Fang Junxian. One was the top swordsman of the abyss, and the other was the sacred protector of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. Either one of them was an existence that could dominate any sacred world. It's been many years since I've seen such a powerful and sharp sword intent. Fang Junxian thought to himself in astonishment. Duguji slowly stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Fang Junxian, but his mind was not on the latter. Nie Tian. All of a sudden, Duguqian's voice entered Nie Tian's ears. His expression flickered with astonishment, and he immediately focused his attention. "Leave the Heavenly Tao Sacred Protector to me, but I can sense that there's someone hiding in the void. This person is the real threat." Duguqian was calm and collected as he secretly transmitted his voice. "There's another lurker." Nie Tian's expression changed again, and he almost shouted. But when he looked around, he could not sense any aura. Moreover, Fat Cat had not warned him. Clearly, this lurker was very skilled. "Thank you for the reminder, Senior." Nie Tian naturally understood Duguji's meaning. After agreeing, he immediately returned to the central pavilion with Hua Qiqiao. Although Duguji was strong, he could not crush Fang Junxian. Even if Duguji could win the next battle, it would most likely be a Pyrrhic victory. If that happened, Duguji would lose the ability to continue fighting. In that case, the Fengtian sect could only take care of the last person lurking in the void. However, the awkward thing was that the Fengtian sect no longer had any combat power. The fact that the assassin had hidden until the very last moment meant that he was no weaker than Fang Junxian. How could the Fengtian sect deal with such a powerful opponent? Nie Tian, is the Flower Supreme all right? Seeing that Nie Tian had returned, Gu Ling Wuji quickly asked. "I'm fine for now." Nie Tian nodded slightly and placed the flower's 7 apertures into the 9 extremities. "Nie Tian, who is this lord?" Gu Ling Wuji looked at Duguji and asked. Nie Tian briefly explained Duguji's identity, but his expression did not relax at all. Instead, it revealed an unconcealable worry. "Nie Tian, what happened?" Gu Ling Wuji felt a little strange. Since an expert like Duguji had appeared, what did Nie Tian have to worry about? Nie Tian didn't hide anything and told him about the infiltrator. This. Gu Ling Wuji let out a cry of shock and was speechless. Initially, he had thought that the Fengtian sect's threat would be limited to the Heavenly Law Divine Protector's appearance. He had not expected that there would still be people hiding in the dark. "Senior Guling, let me fight the last battle." At this moment, Nie Tian's gaze suddenly focused and he said in a heavy tone, "You!" Gu Ling Wuji was stunned. Immediately after, he thought of something and said in shock, "Nie Tian, you really want to? I don't care what method you use, but you must raise my strength to the Tian realm." Before Gu Ling Wuji could finish, Nie Tian said directly. Previously, He had already asked Guling Wuji if there was any method to raise his strength. Guling Wuji had hesitated at that time, which meant that such a method existed. "Nie Tian, you should know that any method to raise one's strength is extremely dangerous." "You?" Guling Wuji frowned and looked troubled. "I'm willing to pay any price." Nie Tian once again interrupted Guling Wuji and said in a heavy tone. Guling Wuji looked at Nie Tian and could feel the determination in his eyes. His heart couldn't help but tremble. "Come with me." After a moment of silence, Guling Wuji finally nodded and said in a deep voice. The two took one last look at Duguji and Fang Junxian in the sky, then turned around and left. Duguji was obviously buying time for Nie Tian, so he was not in a hurry to fight with Fang Junxian. After a while, Nie Tian arrived at the Fengtian sect's Heaven's Boundary Peak under Guling Wuji's lead. The Heaven's Boundary Peak was the sacred peak of the Fengtian sect, and the Heaven Beacon altar was located on this peak. The Heaven Beacon altar floated in the air at the top of the Heaven's Boundary Peak. "Greetings, Beacon Emperor," sect leader. Nie Tian and Guling Wuji landed. The two protectors at the Heaven Beacon altar bowed in unison with puzzled expressions. They didn't know why Nie Tian and Guling Wuji had suddenly come here. "Go and inform the altar protector, Chao Qiqing, to come here immediately." Guling Wuji glanced at the two protectors and said indifferently, "Yes." The two protectors were puzzled but didn't dare to ask further. They answered and immediately went to summon Chao Qiqing. Nie Tian looked at the Heaven Beacon altar and focused on the giant ball of light at the center of the 9 pillars. The giant ball of light was the Fengtian sect's sect light, which symbolized the future of the Fengtian sect. In ancient times, when the Fengtian sect was at its peak, the sect light shone brightly and covered the entire Heaven Beacon mountain range with rainbow-colored light. After that, the Fengtian sect declined and the sect light dimmed. Not long ago, Nie Tian's appearance had caused the sect light to shine with rainbow-colored light once again. But now, the sect light was extremely dim. The circle of light couldn't even cover the entire Heaven's Boundary Peak. Moreover, it was flickering, as if it could be extinguished at any time. This also meant that the Fengtian sect had reached a moment of life and death. Nie Tian, this is the Heaven Beacon altar. The ball of light you see is called the sect light. It symbolizes the future of the Fengtian sect. Guling Wuji's gaze landed on the dim sect light. His tone was somewhat sorrowful. "Senior Guling, please believe in me. I will definitely make the sect light shine once again. I will make the sect light shine brightly in the All Saints world." Nie Tian's expression was calm. His tone was indifferent, but it was filled with absolute dominance and confidence. Guling Wuji looked at Nie Tian and did not say anything else. He only nodded. This time, he was prepared to bet the survival of the Fengtian sect on Nie Tian. He firmly believed that Nie Tian would not disappoint him or the Fengtian sect. A figure descended a moment later. It was the guardian of the Fengtian sect's altar, Chao Qiqing. Lord Beacon Emperor, Sect Master Guling. Chao Qiqing seemed to have guessed something when he saw Nie Tian and Guling Wuji. His expression darkened and he bowed slightly. "Chao Qiqing, prepare for the Heaven Beacon blood sacrifice." Guling Wuji swept his gaze across Chao Qiqing and said without any nonsense, "Heaven Beacon blood sacrifice." Chao Qiqing's expression changed drastically when he heard those words. His eyes widened and he exclaimed almost instinctively, "You mustn't." Chapter 45-50. Chao Qiqing was shocked like never before when he heard that Guling Wuji wanted to carry out the heavenly blood sacrifice. As a guardian of the Fengtian sect's altar, Chao Qiqing knew better than anyone what the heavenly blood sacrifice meant. The sect's luminescence represented the Fengtian sect's lifeline and future. The heavenly blood sacrifice was risking the sect's luminescence. Had the Fengtian sect really reached a point where it had to stake everything on one throw? Sect Master Guling, the heavenly blood sacrifice. Chao Chicheng spoke after a while, but he was interrupted by Gu Ling Wuqi before he could finish. I know very well what the heavenly blood sacrifice means. Gu Ling Wuqi's gaze was deep. He had already made up his mind, however. The Fengtian sect has reached a moment of life and death today. The heavenly blood sacrifice is the only way. Chao Chicheng looked at Gu Ling Wuqi and fell silent for a long time, before finally nodding. The heavenly blood sacrifice had to be carried out at this juncture. Go make the preparations. Gu Ling Wuqi let out a long sigh and waved his hand. He seemed to have aged a few decades in an instant. Yes. Chao Chicheng responded and left. Senior Gu Ling, what exactly is the heavenly blood sacrifice? Nie Tian could not help but ask after Chao Chicheng's figure disappeared. Judging from Gu Ling Wuqi's and Chao Chicheng's reactions, the heavenly blood sacrifice clearly had a great impact on the Fengtian sect. Nie Tian, do you know the essence of the sect's luminescence? Gu Ling Wuqi did not answer Nie Tian and instead asked a question. Essence? Nie Tian frowned and shook his head. Gu Ling Wuqi was not surprised. He sighed softly and said, the history of the All-Heavens sacred world can be divided into 4 eras. The Yuan continent era, the Primordial continent era, the All-Heavens continent era, and the All-Heavens sacred world era. Yes. Nie Tian nodded and could not help but show great interest. He did not know much about the All-Heavens sacred world's history. He only knew the Primordial era, Archean era, Middle Archean era, and Lower Archean era. It was the first time Gu Ling Wuji had heard about the Primordial Continent era, the Ancient Continent era, the Heavenly Continent era, and the Heavenly Sacred World era. Gu Ling Wuji looked at the horizon and continued, legend has it that the original All-Heaven Sacred World was a spherical continent with an extremely small surface area and an extremely high concentration of origin energy. That continent was about the same size as the current dimensional world, or even smaller. It was the earliest form of the sacred world, and it was called the Yuan continent. Yuan continent. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he was shocked. The current All-Heaven Saints world was composed of countless saints' worlds and dark regions. Each saint world was surrounded by countless realms, and each realm was composed of many planes of existence. Therefore, the number of planes and worlds in the entire sacred world was estimated to be in the hundreds of millions. It was hard to imagine that the original Yuan continent was only the size of a plane world. Gu Ling Wuji took a deep breath and continued, no one knows how long the Yuan continent has existed, but it began to expand at an extremely fast rate. Slowly, it became a huge world. It was called the Ancient Continent, and this period is also called the Ancient Continent Era. After that, after an unknown number of years, the Ancient Continent also began to expand, crazily releasing origin energy into the surrounding space, causing the density of origin energy in the Ancient Continent to decrease rapidly. Gradually, it formed an even wider continent, the Heavens Continent. This period was also the Heavens Continent Era. After that, the heavenly continent split and formed a relatively independent sacred world. In the end, it formed the current All-Heaven Sacred World, which is also the current All-Heaven Sacred World era. I see. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He now had a general understanding of the various eras of the All-Heaven Sacred World. However, he was very confused. Why did Gu Ling Wuji say all this? Did it have anything to do with the clan light? During the Primordial Continent era, the first batch of Saint Realm warriors appeared in the human race. Gu Ling Wuji ignored Nie Tian's confusion and continued, it said that it was this first batch of Saint Realm warriors who established the entire system of martial arts cultivation. Therefore, they were respectfully called Ancient Saints by later generations. Ancient Saints. Nie Tian's eyes slightly darkened. He had heard Fat Cat mention Ancient Saints before. However, he didn't know that Ancient Saints appeared during the Primordial Continent era. Yes. Gu Ling Wuji nodded and said, Among the ancient saints there are strong and weak ones. The 9 strongest ones are called the 9 great ancient saints. The 9 great ancient saints are respected by tens of thousands of people. They protect the ancient continent and maintain the order of the ancient continent. As he spoke, Gu Ling Wuji suddenly looked at the clan light. His eyes became a little strange. After a moment of silence, he continued, "Although the ancient saints are strong, their lifespans are limited. The 9 great ancient saints were worried that after they died, the ancient continent would fall into chaos. Thus, they agreed to sacrifice themselves to protect the ancient continent in another way. The 9 great ancient saints sacrificed themselves to protect the ancient continent. It's admirable." Nye Tian also looked at the clan light. He had already guessed something and said in a deep voice, "Yes." Gu Ling Wuji nodded heavily. His eyes that were looking at the clan light had a faint light flashing. He said, "Fengtian mountain range is the place where one of the 9 great ancient saints died." Indeed. Nye Tian had vaguely guessed it, but his heart still shivered. It seemed that the clan light was closely related to the ancient saint master who had died that year. "Nye Tian, you already know that the entire Fengtian sect is a great formation that is made of human bodies." Gu Ling Wuji's eyes were deep as he asked, "Do you know who this great formation originated from?" "That ancient saint master." Nye Tian immediately understood. His eyes trembled as he blurted out, "Yes." Gu Ling Wuji nodded and said, "Before ancient saint master died, he used himself as a guide to build the Fengtian Grand Array. Every mountain gate and every stone statue of the Fengtian sect contains the bloodline and divine soul of ancient saint master." "So that's how it is." Nye Tian was shocked. After learning the truth, he had a different feeling about everything in front of him. The Fengtian Grand Array was unimaginably huge. It was the most terrifying great formation that Nye Tian had ever seen. The fact that ancient Saint Master turned his body into a formation showed how powerful he was when he was alive. It was hard to believe that such a powerful person existed in this world. Nye Tian guessed that with ancient Saint Master's strength, even an expert like the Yang God Sword Emperor wouldn't be able to contend against him. Then the clan light. Then Nye Tian suddenly thought of something. His eyes trembled as he looked at the clan light. His lips trembled slightly and he couldn't speak for a while. The clan light must have originated from ancient Saint Master, and it was very likely that it was the most important part of him. Chapter 45-51. Heart. Upon hearing Gu Ling Wuji's words, Nye Tian's eyes flickered violently. It was easy to imagine how shocked he was. No wonder the sect light was so important to the Fengtian sect. It was the Saint Venerable Gu's heart. The fact that a heart could exist for so long and still emit light showed how powerful the Saint Venerable was. The Saint Venerable Gu sacrificed himself to protect this world after his death. Gu Ling Wuji looked at the sect light with a solemn face and said in a deep voice, "However, how could Lord Gu Ling Wuji imagine that the ancient continent would become the all-heavens sacred world? The changes of the continent and the power of the world aren't something a human can resist." Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he fell silent. "Nye Tian, the sky beacon blood sacrifice we're going to do is related to the sect light." Moments later, Gu Ling Wuji calmed down a lot. He looked at Nye Tian and explained, "The so-called heaven-burning blood sacrifice uses one's bloodline as a catalyst to trigger the resonance of one's bloodline and draw it into one's body to strengthen one's strength." "Elder Gu Ling, are you saying that I'm going to fuse with the sect light?" Nye Tian frowned and asked in confusion. "It's not a fusion. It's just a temporary resonance." Gu Ling Wuji shook his head and explained patiently, "The sect light is too powerful. Ordinary cultivators can't bear it, let alone fuse with it. The sky beacon blood sacrifice only allows you to resonate with the sect light. That way you can gain power from it. But your martial body is too weak. It can't bear the power of the sect light for a long time. When the sect light senses that your martial body can't bear it, it will leave your body. Yes. Nye Tian didn't quite understand, but he still nodded. When the sect light resonates with you, it will devour your life and cause irreversible damage. Gu Ling Wuji's eyes darkened and he continued, in the history of the Fengtian sect, only 2 people have performed the Sky Beacon blood sacrifice, and they were close to the peak of the Sky martial realm. Even so, after the Heaven Beacon blood sacrifice, the 2 of them suffered great damage to their life veins and died not long after. As he spoke, Gu Ling Wuji looked at Nye Tian and said in a low voice, "You're too weak, but your life vein is much stronger than theirs. Plus, you have the 10th life vein, so you should be able to withstand the power of the clan's light." Yes. Nye Tian nodded. There was no sign of retreat in his eyes. Even though there was the danger of his life veins being damaged, he was still fearless. At this time, Chao Qiqing returned, followed by a dozen altar guards. "Lord Beacon Emperor, Sect Master Guling, we are ready." Chao Qiqing did not say much and said directly, "Then let's begin." Gu Ling Wuji nodded slightly with a solemn look on his face. If it wasn't a matter of life and death, he definitely wouldn't let Nye Tian and the light of the clan take the risk. Chao Qiqing nodded and said to Nye Tian, "Lord Beacon Emperor, you just need to sit in the center of the altar and relax your body. No matter what happens, don't resist. Leave the rest to us." "Thank you." Nye Tian smiled faintly and jumped to the center of the altar. He sat cross-legged with his eyes closed, as if he was cultivating normally. Chao Qiqing ordered a dozen or so altar guards to sit down around Nye Tian. Once everyone was seated, Chao Qiqing carefully checked again to make sure there was nothing wrong. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. "Sect Master Guling, I'm going to start." Chao Qiqing took a deep breath and looked at Gu Ling Wuji. How could Gu Ling Wuji not understand that Chao Qiqing was asking at the end, but he did not speak and only nodded heavily. Chao Qiqing's eyes were deep and did not say anything else. He spread out his hands and runes gushed out from his palms, flowing in the air and quickly forming a small sacred array that enveloped Nye Tian and the others. "Blood array, open!" Chao Qiqing bellowed and pressed down with both hands, instantly opening the array. In an instant, within the blood array, countless blood-red sharp blades appeared and directly pierced towards Nye Tian and the others. PFFF, PFFF, PFFF. Instantly, the sound of flesh being cut was heard. Nye Tian and the others were instantly riddled with holes and became bloodied. However, these wounds were only superficial and perfectly avoided the vital parts. They were completely within the range of what Nye Tian and the others could endure. Within the blood array, blood splattered and the blood surged like a rain of blood. The Heaven Beacon blood sacrifice used the bloodline of a martial artist as a guide to trigger the resonance of the light of the clan. High up in the sky, the light of the clan felt the aura of the bloodline and suddenly brightened a little. At the same time, it began to slowly descend. The aura of the bloodline of Lord Beacon Emperor seems to be different from ordinary people. He can actually trigger the resonance of the light of the clan so easily. Seeing this scene, Chao Qiqing was shocked and felt that it was unbelievable. Originally, he was worried that Nye Tian's cultivation was too weak to trigger the light of the clan. He did not expect it to be so easy. Nye Tian's bloodline and martial body are far from ordinary people's. I hope he can withstand the pressure of the light of the clan. Gu Ling Wuji's eyes darkened slightly, still a little worried. At this moment, the light of the clan had already landed on top of the blood array and began to slowly enter the blood array. Nye Tian closed his eyes and concentrated, but his heart was filled with awe. Being so close to the light of the clan made him feel a strong sense of restlessness in his bloodline. Moreover, the aura of the light of the clan also shocked him. It was as if the light of the clan still had a life of its own after tens of millions of years. Soon, the light of the clan completely entered the blood array and directly pressed down on top of Nye Tian's head. At this moment, Nie Tian clearly felt a violent surge of blood rushing in his body, as if it was about to burst out of his body. Nie Tian instinctively wanted to suppress this violent surge of energy. However, he suddenly remembered what Chao Qiqing said, that no matter what happened, he should not resist. Hence, he relaxed. Boom! Instantly, a violent surge of blood energy rushed out of Nie Tian's body, forming a bloody mist that enveloped the light of the clan. At the same time, the altar guards opened their eyes at the same time. They knew that the most crucial moment had arrived. The altar guards manipulated their lifelines at the same time and performed a shocking act. The altar guards' eyes were filled with determination as they forcefully extracted their lifelines from their bodies. Extracting one's own lifelines was an act of suicide. Gu Ling Wuji and Chao Qiqing, who were watching from the side, were not surprised. Instead, they could not help but feel nervous. The altar guards were there to help Nie Tian merge the light of the clan. Their method was to use their lifelines as chains to lock the light of the clan. Inside the blood formation, a dozen or so altar guardians condensed the lifeline in their hands into lifeline chains, then extended them towards the light of the lineage, firmly locking it in place. The light of the clan seemed to have a life of its own. When it sensed that Nie Tian was about to absorb it, it began to resist and tried to escape from the blood array. However, it was locked down by the chains of lifelines and could not move at all. Suppress! The altar guards shouted in unison with determined expressions. The chains of lifelines in their hands pressed down, causing half of the light of the clan to merge with Nie Tian's martial body. Chapter 45-52. In the sky above the Sky Beacon Plaza, the battle between the strongest shook the heavens and the earth. Duguqian stood as cold as a sword. Sword will surged around him, and waves of sword chi spread out like ripples, spreading in all directions and creating a great momentum in the air. Fang Junxian felt the waves of sword will in the air. His eyes were dark and murderous. At this point, the two of them had already exchanged more than 10 blows, but there was no clear winner. Duguji, what are you waiting for? Fang Junxian could tell that Duguji was stalling for time, but he could not figure out what his motive was. Could it be that the Fengtian sect still had some hidden experts? Before coming here, Fang Junxian had a rough understanding of almost all the experts in the 7th Sacred Cultivator world. According to Heaven Dao Pavilion leader Yun Etian, other than the few old monsters in the Eternal Abyss, there was no one too strong in the 7th Sacred Cultivator world. To be honest, Fang Junxian was already surprised that Duguji had appeared. He did not believe that the few people in the Eternal Abyss would appear as well. Duguji, no matter who you are waiting for, the final result will not change. Even if you can defeat me, you cannot defeat the last person. Fang Junxian's eyes narrowed as he thought of the person hiding in the void. He felt much more at ease. Even Yun Etian was wary of that person's strength. Not to mention Duguji, even if his master, Elder Wanjian, came back to life, he would not be a match for that person. The famous 7 broken swords of the Eternal Abyss is only SOSO. Fang Junxian could not help but laugh coldly. He took a step forward, and his aura exploded like an avalanche, threatening to engulf everything in its path. Is that so? Duguji also laughed coldly. He stepped on the ground lightly, and his sword will whistled as he forcefully broke through his opponent's aura. Duguji, show me your true strength. Fang Junxian did not want to waste any more time. His aura surged again, and the whistling sound was like thunder. A powerful ancient beast pounced on Fang Junxian. Very good. Duguji laughed and unsheathed the Heaven's Destroyer. A sharp aura pierced through the air and broke through the attack in front of him. Fang Junxian frowned as he felt an extreme chill assaulting him. He immediately retreated 100 meters away. Although he was not injured, he was in a sorry state. He finally drew his sword. Fang Junxian steadied himself, his eyes cold and murderous. Looks like I've underestimated you. If the Heavenly Divine Protector is only at this level, then it's too disappointing. Duguji smiled coldly, and the sword will around him suddenly exploded, like a curtain of rain. It was extremely strange. Although Duguqian was very powerful and had been suppressing Fang Junxian throughout the battle, he could feel that there was a terrifying force within Fang Junxian's body that seemed to be stirring, waiting for the moment to explode. Enraging me is the biggest mistake you have made. Fang Junxian's lips curled into a cold smile. A layer of strange red flame appeared around his body. It was like fire and the sun. So this is your trump card. Duguji's eyes darkened as he smiled coldly. Is that all you've got? Is that so? Fang Junxian sneered as well. He seemed to be laughing at Duguji's ignorance because the latter did not know what this red flame was. As soon as he finished speaking, Fang Junxian flipped his palm over and a red flame shot out. It looked extremely small and was only a red line of fire, but if one looked closely, they would see that wherever the line of fire passed through, the void became misty as if it had been destroyed. Duguji could feel that the red flame was extremely strange. He frowned and retreated. At the same time, the Heaven's Destroyer spun in the air and covered himself with a sword will shield. But the next moment, the line of fire reached him and easily pierced through the sword will shield. Then, it pierced through Duguji's arm. Duguji's eyes darkened. He looked down and saw that the place where his arm had been pierced was burning. The fire spread rapidly and covered half of his arm. How is this possible? Duguji was shocked. He immediately circulated the sword will in his body, trying to extinguish the red flame. Unexpectedly, the sword will of the Red Flame Sutra burned even more fiercely and spread to his entire arm. Duguqian's expression changed drastically. Making a prompt decision, he raised the crippling heaven and chopped off his entire arm with his sword. The arm was burned to ashes in the blink of an eye. Duguqian was so shocked that he was speechless for a moment. He was a divine ancestor in the 9th tier of the sky martial arts realm. His martial body was so strong that even the lava of a super volcano could not cause any damage to him. But that red flame could actually burn his martial body, and even his sword will could not extinguish it. It was too strange. The crowd was also stunned by the scene before them. Many people looked at Fang Junxian in fear. The layer of red flame around Fang Junxian's body could be said to be abnormal. The martial body of a sky martial ancestor was so strong that even heavenly fire could not invade it. But with Duguji's strength, he was almost burned to death by a red flame. How could the crowd not be shocked? What kind of flame is that? How can it be so strong? Not only did it break through the sword will shield, but it also almost burned him to death. That red flame is a little strange. It seems to be able to burn anything it touches. The Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion's Heaven Tao Sacred Protector is indeed not an ordinary person. The Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion is indeed the #1 power in the all heavens. The crowd calmed down and discussed softly. It was as if they could already see the outcome of the battle. Fang Junxian already had an overwhelming advantage. It was only a matter of time before he defeated Duguji. Up in the sky, Duguji was much calmer. His face was gloomy, and he still had a lingering fear. If he had not decisively severed his arm, he would have been burned to ashes by now. He could not figure out what kind of power that red flame was. How could it be so terrifying? Duguji listened carefully. This is the power of the sun-devouring golden crow. Fang Junxian seemed to have seen through Duguji's doubts. He smiled cold and was full of arrogance. Sun-devouring golden crow. Duguji's eyes widened. One of the 9 great elemental beasts. Seems like you are not stupid. You actually know that the sun-devouring golden crow is one of the 9 great elemental beasts. Fang Junxian smiled like a god. The sun-devouring golden crow was one of the 9 great elemental beasts like Nye Tian's 9 extreme chaos beast, the myriad tribulation beast's night elephant, and Xie Tianquang's thunder ape. It seems like the sun-devouring golden crow is a fire elemental beast. No wonder the power of the red flame was so terrifying. Doguji's eyes narrowed as he calmed down. Even at this moment, you can still maintain your composure. Should I say that you are stupid or that you are not afraid of death? Fang Juanxian's lips twitched coldly. A ball of golden crow flames appeared in his palm, and his eyes flashed with killing intent. Doguji laughed. Heavenly Tao Divine Protector, do you think that the seven remnant sword is only this? As soon as he finished speaking, something strange happened. Doguji's body shook slightly, and his severed arm grew back. Moreover, the sword intent aura around him suddenly changed. It was a completely different sword aura from before, and it surged like the sea. Feng Yun Reading Net. Chapter 45-53. How is this possible? Fang Junxian exclaimed in shock when he saw Doguji's arm regenerate and exude a sword intent aura that was completely different from before. The martial body of a martial artist was far more powerful than that of an ordinary person. This was especially true for a Sage Realm martial artist. Their martial body was filled with rich world energy. So, they could maintain a high level of activity. Therefore, their aging speed was extremely slow. Moreover, they could recover on their own as long as they didn't suffer a fatal injury. Most Sage Realm cultivators wouldn't be able to recover from a severed limb, but it would take some time. It was extremely rare to see someone like Doguji, who could recover in the blink of an eye, unless their martial body was unique or they had a unique regeneration technique. Doguji was from the Abyss Ghost tribe, so it was normal for his martial body to be different from an ordinary person's. But Fang Junxian couldn't figure out how Doguji was able to exude a completely different sword intent aura. Compared to before, Doguji seemed to have undergone a metamorphosis. The sword intent aura around him had reached a whole new realm of swordsmanship. When the crowd saw the changes in Doguji's body, they were shocked beyond words. The seven remnant sword technique can regrow his arm in the blink of an eye. His martial body must be different from an ordinary person's. His sword intent aura has changed too. Could he have cultivated many different sword intents? I don't think it's many sword intents. It's more like his sword intent has evolved. A strange light shone in the crowd's eyes as they spoke. Perhaps this battle wasn't going to be as simple as they had imagined. Something's not right. At this time, Fang Junxian, who was high up in the sky, noticed something. His expression changed and he exclaimed, "Your body was originally incomplete. Your arm was formed from sword intent and is not your original body." Lord Holy Protector saw through it. Gudu Qian smiled faintly. "I cultivate the seven remnant sword technique. So many parts of my body are incomplete. However, the seven remnant sword technique is enough to replace my incomplete body, and even make my martial body stronger than an ordinary person's. So that's how it is." Fang Junxian calmed down, and a flame flashed in his eyes. He could see that Doguji's entire body, other than his brain, heart, and a few other vital parts, was formed from sword intent. It was no exaggeration to say that 90% of Doguji's body was formed by sword intent. It was no wonder that his sword will aura was far stronger than that of a swordsman of the same level. It was even comparable to Yin Feng Anata, who had reached the realm of becoming one with the sword. Yin Feng Selfless and the Yang God Sword Emperors one with the sword were achieved through the improvement of one's own sword intent. As for Doguji's current state, it was more like he had become one with the sword. He was still a step away from truly becoming one with the sword. However, Doguji's method had its limitations. He would never be able to use his sword intent to replace important parts like his brain and heart, so he would never be able to truly become one with his sword. So the Golden Crow's flames just now only burned a portion of your sword intent. Fang Junxian saw through Dogujian's true nature, and could not help but smirk. "I'd like to see if you can rise from the ashes if I incinerate your entire body." Dogujian's face darkened. Boom. The moment his words landed, Fang Junxian flipped his palm, and a gust of golden crow flame burst forth, blooming in the air like a lotus flower. It then spread into a sea of fire, and a scorching aura permeated the entire area, heading straight for Duguqian. Cripple the 7 remnant techniques, pardon the heavens for killing, reverse the flow in all directions, traceless sword. At the same time, Duguji's voice rang through the air. His body was like a mountain, and he did not move an inch. The sword intent hidden in his body was finally unleashed. The ultimate moves of both sides would determine the victor. You want to fight me? You're courting death. Fang Junxian could not help but sneer when he saw that Duguji had no intention of retreating. He could already see the scene of Duguji being burned to ashes by the golden crow's flames. Rumble! 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 In the sky, the golden crow's flames roared like fire dragons and spread in all directions, incinerating everything in its path. Although Duguji had unleashed a powerful sword intent, he was completely defenseless against the golden crow's flames and was instantly incinerated. The terrifying flames of the golden crow pressed down from all directions, drowning Duguqian within it. Everyone stared at the scene in the sky in shock. Their eyes were trembling, and their hearts were filled with indescribable shock. Duguji had been engulfed in the sea of fire. Did that mean that he was no longer alive and had been reduced to ashes? But judging from Duguji's aura, he should not have been so weak. The strongest swordsman in the abyss, 7 remnant sword Duguji, no longer exists today. Fang Junxian looked at the sea of fire in the distance and smiled cold. Swoosh! But at that moment, a sharp sword intent pierced through the sea of fire. It was so fast that it took no time to blink. Fang Junxian's face stiffened. He subconsciously summoned his golden crow shield, but he was too late. Puff! In the next moment, the sound of flesh being torn apart could be heard. Fang Junxian's body trembled, and he looked down to see that there was a hole in his chest where his heart was. Fresh blood flowed out and dyed his body red. This! Fang Junxian's mouth twitched. He wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Impossible, is it? Almost at the same time, a cold, mocking voice rang out. Fang Junxian turned around and saw a figure standing behind him. It was Duguji. How could you? Fang Junxian's voice trembled as he stared at Duguji in disbelief. Duguji was clearly buried in the sea of fire. How could he have escaped? That was the sun-devouring golden crow's flames, the most powerful flame in the world. How could Duguji escape from the golden crow's flames? Lord Holy Protector, you underestimate the people of this world. Duguji sneered. Do you really think that your golden crow's flames are invincible? What other power do you have? Fang Junxian used the last of his strength to forcefully hold on and asked unwillingly. The power of Dihong. Before Duguji could speak, another voice rang out, cold and emotionless. Back then, it was rumored that Elder Wan Jian possessed the power of Dihong. He hid in the eternal abyss to find an inheritor of the power of Dihong. It seems that the rumors are true. You finally showed up. Duguqian was not at all surprised by this voice that came out of nowhere. He turned his body to look at a figure in black standing not far away. The figure exuded waves of black aura, like a dark abyss. Save me. When Fang Junxian saw the black-robed man, his eyes shone with despair and he spoke with difficulty. Don't worry. The sword intent just now was restrained. Your heart is not completely destroyed. The black-robed man said emotionlessly, You have the sun-devouring golden crow in your body, so you won't die. But it will take some time for you to recover. Fang Junxian's eyes lit up when he heard the black-robed man's words. He forced himself to stand. No wonder I felt the sword intent weakened. So it was you who attacked. Duguji looked at the black-robed man and called out a name, Yuan Tianjili. Feng Yun Reading Net. Chapter 45-54. Yuan Tianjili. When Duguji uttered this name, there was a slight tremor in his voice. The Li clan had 3 chiefs, and Yuan Tianjili was the strongest among the 3 chiefs. Duguji had sensed that someone was hiding in the void, but he had never imagined that the person hiding was Yuan Tianjili. You're worthy of being old man Wang Jian's successor, to be able to recognize me. Yuan Tianjili was not afraid of his identity. He spoke in a low voice as he walked towards Duguji, step by step. With every step he took, the surrounding space-time grew heavier, as if the world would split apart at any moment. Master once mentioned you, and said that you're the strongest person he's ever met in his life. Duguji calmed down and spoke in a low voice, noticing that he did not sense any killing intent from Yuan Tianjili. Back then, Old Man Myriad Swords could be considered one of my strongest enemies. Yuan Tianli seemed to raise his head slightly and looked into the distance, as if he was thinking back to the past. He said, not only was he a powerful swordsman, but he was also one of the few remaining messengers. If he didn't have the power of Dihong, he wouldn't have been able to contend against me. As he spoke, Yuan Tianjili turned around. His eyes, hidden in the darkness, flickered with a strange light. He continued, you were able to block the Golden Crow's power not because you're strong in the way of the sword, but because of the power of Dihong in your body. Of course I can't hide this from you. Duguji nodded, not denying it. What kind of person was Yuan Tianjili? He was an existence that had transcended several eras, so he could naturally see the truth. However, the power of Dihong in your body isn't complete, so I'm guessing that you didn't inherit the power of Dihong, but only fused a portion of Dihong's power into your sword intent. Yuan Tianjili's eyes flickered again as he said lightly. Duguji's eyes trembled, and he was quite surprised. He didn't expect Yuan Tianjili to be able to see through this. It was true that he had not inherited Dihong's power. Instead, with the help of Elder Wang Jian, he had fused a portion of Dihong's power into his sword intent. Like the sun-swallowing Golden Crow, Dihong was also one of the 9 great essence beasts. Therefore, Dihong's power was able to resist the Golden Crow's flames. However, Dihong was a meta-beast. Even someone as strong as Duguji could not inherit it. Dihong has yet to find a true successor. This means that old man Wang Jian should still be alive. Yuan Tianjili seemed to be enjoying Duguji's shocked reaction. Although Duguji tried his best to remain calm, Yuan Tianjili's words still made his face change. Yuan Tianjili was able to infer from Dihong's power that old man Wang Jian was still alive. This was something that Duguji didn't expect. Back then, after old man Wang Jian went into the eternal abyss, he announced that he had sealed his sword. Not long after, the news of his death spread. Everyone in the eternal abyss thought that old man Wang Jian was dead. Only Duguji and the other 2 knew that old man Wang Jian was still alive. Before finding Dihong's successor, old man Wang Jian would not die. Don't worry. I don't have any grudges with old man Wang Jian. It's just that our positions are different. Since he has sealed his sword, I naturally won't look for him. Yuan Tianjili saw what Duguji was worried about and said indifferently, Thank you, Your Excellency. Duguji frowned and bowed slightly to thank him. This thank you was sincere. Old man Wang Jian faked his death that year. Apart from wanting to retreat, he also didn't want to be disturbed. Now, although old man Wang Jian was still alive, he was old and his lifespan had reached its limit. He basically didn't interact with outsiders. I hope that old man Wang Jian can find Dihong's successor as soon as possible. This world will have one more decent opponent. Yuan Tianjili opened his mouth again and revealed a rare emotion. He said, although old man Wang Jian had Dihong, he couldn't unleash Dihong's true power due to the hindrance of the martial body. Otherwise, with Dihong's strength, it's not impossible for him to defeat me. As for the matter of Dihong's successor, my master is already indifferent to it. Whether he can find it or not, it's up to heaven's will. Duguji was also a little helpless. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. Dihong's successor was very important and the requirements were very strict. Even people like Duguji and Bingji didn't meet the requirement. Yuan Tianjili was silent for a while and suddenly said, "You're waiting for that young man called Nie Tian, right?" Duguji's eyes shook violently and he couldn't help but panic. "Don't panic. Your battle is over. The next battle belongs to me and Nie Tian." Yuan Tianjili let out a rare laugh and said, "I really want to know what level Nie Tian can reach after breaking through his limits." Yuan Tianjili was calm and composed. It was obvious that he already knew what Nie Tian was doing. The two of them didn't hide their conversation from the crowd, but everyone was confused. These two are experts from the Eternal Abyss. That is the place where the Abyss Ghost Race lives in seclusion. It seems that they are from the Abyss Ghost Race. Why are they here? That Lord's strength looks stronger than the 7 broken swords. Why does he want to fight with Nie Tian? Everyone knew Nie Tian's strength. Although he was talented, his realm was too low. He didn't even have the chance to fight before. Yuan Tianjili said he wanted to fight with Nie Tian. It was too strange. Boom. Just when everyone was confused, an enormous aura soared up from a mountain in the distance. It was like a mad dragon that soared into the clouds. Majestic waves spread in the sky and shook the earth. This is... Sensing the terrifying aura coming from the void, the crowd could not help but gasp in unison. The shock they felt was indescribable. Duguji was also shocked by the aura and couldn't speak for a while. He had never seen such an aura in his life. The Feng Tian blood sacrifice is a success. Yuan Tianli raised his head and looked over with excitement in his tone. At the same time, on the Feng Tian peak, boom, 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 a terrifying power swirled around Nie Tian like a thunderstorm, rumbling incessantly. With the help of a dozen altar guards, the lineage light had completely entered Nie Tian's body. After a while, the lineage light finally resonated with Nie Tian. Nie Tian's power weakened and his whole body shone brightly. The holy light was like the sun, making people want to worship him. It's a success. Gu Ling Wuqi and Chao Qiqing were excited. Their eyes sparkled. The Feng Tian blood sacrifice was smoother than they had expected. Nie Tian's martial body was stronger than they had expected. They didn't know what realm Nie Tian's cultivation had reached. At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly opened his eyes. His star-like eyes were unusually bright as he looked down at the world. The 9th level of the Heaven Martial Realm. Nie Tian felt the power in his body and clenched his fist. He felt like he was in control of the world. After the Feng Tian blood sacrifice, it resonated with the lineage light and allowed Nie Tian's cultivation to reach the 9th level of the Heaven Martial Realm. Chapter 45-55. The 9th level of the Sky Martial Realm. After the heavenly blood sacrifice, Nie Tian's cultivation had reached the peak of the Sky Martial Realm. The surging power in his body made his blood boil. Nie Tian hadn't expected that his strength would increase by so much after merging with the sect light, which was far beyond his estimation. Lord Beacon Emperor, how do you feel now? Chao Qiqing was just as excited as Nie Tian, but he suppressed his excitement and stepped forward. The heavenly blood sacrifice had allowed Nie Tian's cultivation to reach the 9th level of the Sky Martial Realm, which Chao Qiqing didn't expect. He originally thought that even if Nie Tian's martial body was special and he had the 10th meridian, he wouldn't be able to combine well with the light of the clan. He didn't expect the reality to be so different. If Nie Tian's cultivation had reached the Sky Martial Realm, he might even be able to combine with the light of the clan. If that was the case, it would be too terrifying. The light of the clan was the heart of an ancient saint venerable. However, Chao Qiqing was still calm and didn't let it get to his head. He was still worried that something was wrong with Nie Tian's martial body. Nie Tian took a deep breath and sensed his surroundings. He smiled and said, "Altar Protector, don't worry. I'm fine." But then, Nie Tian looked around and saw a dozen withered corpses. He suddenly thought of something and exclaimed, "They're the altar protectors." These withered corpses were the altar protectors who had helped Nie Tian combine with the light of the clan. Yes. Chao Chicheng nodded with a heavy expression. Guling Wuji stepped forward and said, "Helping the Beacon Emperor combine with the light of the clan was their mission. They did a good job." Nie Tian's face was gloomy and he didn't say anything for a long time. He didn't expect that combining with the light of the clan would require such a heavy price. If he had known, he would have reconsidered. But things had come to this and there was no turning back. All Nie Tian could do now was to protect the Fengtian sect and not let their sacrifice be in vain. "Nie Tian, let's go," Guling Wuji said in a deep voice and turned around to lead the way. Nie Tian followed behind, while Chao Chicheng stayed behind to properly arrange the remains of the sacrificial altar guards. At the same time, in the sky above Sky Beacon Square, the wind was as sharp as a blade. The cloud was silent. The air was filled with a murderous aura that caused one to feel suffocated. Duguji's eyes trembled slightly. He looked at the distant sky with worry in his heart. He had already guessed that Nie Tian would take extreme measures. At the same time, he had also seen some clues from Yuan Tianjili's reaction. However, he did not expect Nie Tian to personally fight against Yuan Tianjili. He had already seen through Nie Tian's cultivation with a single glance. No matter how talented Nie Tian was, he had to at least reach the advanced sky martial state in order to fight against Yuan Tianjili. Duguqian had seen countless miraculous techniques in the world, but he couldn't think of any technique that could allow a cultivator in the first level of the Celestial Awakening realm to reach the high level of the Celestial Martial Arts realm. Moreover, even if Nie Tian had really reached the advanced sky martial state, Duguji did not believe that he could fight against Yuan Tianjili. His master, Wan Jian, had lost to Yuan Tianjili when he was at his peak with Dihong. Duguqian even felt that even the legendary Heaven Dao Pavilion Master or the current human emperor, who had been hiding behind the scenes, might not be a match for Yuan Tianli. Yuan Tianjili was the most powerful among the three founding Li. Now that he had appeared, he was more powerful than the other powerful figures in the Eternal Abyss. On the other hand, Yuan Tianjili, although no one could see his expression, they could sense his excitement, as though he was looking forward to something. The surrounding crowd seemed to have guessed something amidst the oppressive atmosphere. They looked at the peak of the mountain with great anticipation. "He's here." Yuan Tianjili's gaze was sharp as he seemed to have sensed something and spoke in a deep voice. Just as he finished speaking, a figure descended from the sky like a meteor. It was as bright as a flame, and the holy light was like a torch. Nie Tian. When the crowd saw the holy light figure clearly, their eyes trembled violently, and they shouted a name at the same time. They could not believe that the figure was actually Nie Tian. However, at this moment, Nie Tian's aura was completely different from before. If the previous Nie Tian was a small stream, then he was now an endless ocean, giving off a feeling that one could not see the bottom. Everyone stared at Nie Tian, their hearts filled with shock. They even wondered if the person standing in front of them was really Nie Tian. An hour and a half ago, he was only a Heaven Awakening Stage 1 martial artist. Now, he was at the peak. Was this really not a dream? The crowd could not be blamed. If this happened to anyone else, they would not believe it. Nie Tian, you did not disappoint me. At this moment, Yuan Tianjili spoke. His tone was cold again, and at the same time, it carried a strong sense of oppression. Duguqian took a glance at Nie Tian and secretly told him what he wanted to know. "It turns out that Your Excellency is Yuan Tianjili." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he asked directly, "You killed Xiao Yang, the third deputy dean of the sacred religion, right?" "Just an ant." Yuan Tianjili responded calmly, as if Xiao Yang was less than an ant in his eyes. "Su Yu was also taken away by Your Excellency?" Nie Tian continued to ask. "You should already know the identity of that girl." Yuan Tian Zhili responded faintly. I don't want to be your enemy, but I didn't expect things to develop to this point. Primordial Een. Nie Tian's eyes suddenly narrowed and his heart sank. Bing Ji had guessed before that Su Yu was very likely to be one of the three principals, Primordial Een, and now it was confirmed. No wonder Yuan Tian Zhili personally appeared to take Su Yu away. There should be someone behind, Your Excellency. Nie Tian calmed down a little and asked in a deep voice. Nie Tian and the Fengtian sect had no grudges with the Li clan, but the Li clan had always been targeting the Fengtian sect. Clearly, someone had instructed them to do so. It's just a deal. Yuan Tian responded indifferently. With your intelligence, you should have already known who is trying to harm the Fengtian sect. The Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion, the Human Emperor Palace. Nie Tian's eyes darkened, and he already had an answer in his heart. The Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion and the Human Emperor Palace had a grudge against Nie Tian, and this time's selection had most likely touched the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion's nerves. In addition, the collapse of the heavens had made the seventh sacred cultivator world more and more important, so it was not surprising that the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion wanted to completely control the seventh sacred cultivator world. However, the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion would never have imagined that Nie Tian and the Fengtian sect's tenacity was far beyond their imagination. Yuan Tian Zhili should have made a deal with the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion or the Human Emperor Palace, and both sides were mutually beneficial. As for the Abyssal Ghoul race, they should have been implicated by the Li clan. If that's the case, Nie Tian would like to fight. Nie Tian gradually came to a realization. He knew that this battle was unavoidable, so he didn't waste any more words. He took a step forward, and his aura erupted as he asked for permission to fight. Chapter 45-56. High up in the sky, Nie Tian's aura erupted. The tyrannical aura shrouded the sky and filled the entire world with a strange bloodline qi. Now that he knew Yuan Tian Zhili's purpose, this battle was unavoidable. He would fight with all his might. In the face of Nie Tian's strong request to fight, Yuan Tian Zhili's body moved slightly. He seemed to feel something and said, Your aura is no weaker than the current peak powerhouses. I wonder how strong you are? I'll know after I try. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched coldly. In the next moment, his figure moved directly. He was as fast as lightning and rushed straight towards Yuan Tian Zhili. Interesting. Yuan Tian Zhili felt Nie Tian's sharpness and naturally understood what the latter was going to do. He could not help but let out a faint smile. How could he not see that Nie Tian wanted to fight him with a pure martial body? This battle method was not only to show his opponent the strength of his martial body, but it was also a provocation. Yuan Tian Zhili stood coldly in place and did not avoid it. He also wanted to see how strong Nie Tian was at the moment. Nie Tian's figure was like lightning. In an instant, he rushed over and was less than 5 meters away from Yuan Tian Zhili. Bang! In the next moment, the two of them punched out at almost the same time. Their fists collided like a volcanic eruption. An incomparably tyrannical force exploded, directly causing the space within several meters to crack. A space-time storm rushed out and hit Nie Tian and Yuan Tian Zhili. However, the two seemed to feel nothing and did not retreat at all. This! Everyone gasped in unison when they saw this scene, and they were shocked to the point of being dumbstruck. Who would have thought that the two peak powerhouses would choose such a primitive and direct way to fight? Moreover, although the two of them were fighting directly with martial bodies, they were able to tear through the void with just their physical strength. One could imagine the strength of their strength. High up in the sky, the most direct martial body confrontation caused the two figures to sway at the same time. However, neither of them retreated. Instead, they moved to the side and attacked again. Bang! 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 The two of them were extremely fast and powerful. Terrifying sounds of collision could be heard continuously in the void. Suddenly, the space-time storm seemed to have erupted and frantically rushed out. However, when it hit the bodies of Nie Tian and Yuan Tianjili, it was like scratching an itch. Boom! A moment later, a massive space-time storm formed beside Nie Tian and Luo Yunyang. The space-time storm was like a giant dragon in the space, its aura violent. Everywhere it passed, space-time would be torn apart. Whoosh! High up in the sky, a huge space-time crack formed, and a space-time storm poured out like the Milky Way. Feeling the terrifying power coming from the sky, everyone's expression changed, and they all became panic-stricken. Once such a huge space-time storm gathered, it would form a space-time whirlpool, which was a power that could sweep everything. The strength of the space-time whirlpool was enough to swallow Nie Tian and Yuan Tianjili in an instant. At that time, the entire Sky Beacon Square and the people in the surrounding pavilions would not be able to escape. Once the space-time whirlpool swallowed enough power, it would form a super-huge space-time whirlpool, and then a space-time black hole. And a space-time black hole was enough to swallow a sacred world. No one thought that the power of Nie Tian and Luo Yunyang was so strong that they could cause such a terrifying space-time storm. At the same time, in the huge space-time storm, Nie Tian's eyes were firm and murderous. There was not the slightest fluctuation of origin power around him, only the purest physical strength. It made his entire body swell up, and he became much taller. He did not expect that at the 9th level of the heaven realm, his martial body could be so strong. And Yuan Tianjili's martial body was also incomparably strong. The two of them fought for so long, but they did not show the slightest hint of exhaustion. Nie Tian originally thought that Yuan Tianjili's strongest should be the ghost chi in his body, but he did not expect the latter's martial body to be so strong. No wonder when the three Yuanli combined, they could compete with experts of Yu Sangqiong's level. Nie Tian punched continuously. Under the interference of the space-time storm, he could no longer see Yuan Tianjili's shadow, but he could feel the existence of the latter's aura. Yuan Tianjili was the same. He punched continuously, but every punch seemed to hit the hardest stone wall. Moreover, what shocked Yuan Tianjili was that Nie Tian's power did not weaken in the slightest, and it even faintly showed signs of becoming stronger. It should be known that the fight between their martial bodies seemed to be very easy, but every punch was enough to destroy a city or a mountain. If either of them was slightly weaker, they would definitely be seriously injured. With such a high intensity of power consumption, Nie Tian did not weaken in the slightest. The strength of his martial body had already exceeded the limits of a peak martial artist. It was too terrifying. Lord Beacon Emperor, if we continue to fight like this, the space-time whirlpool will swallow both of us. At that time, your Fengtian sect will not be able to survive. In the endless space-time storm, Yuan Tianjili spoke in a deep voice. Although it was cold, it carried a hint of weakness. Yuan Tianjili originally thought that after his rebirth, there should be very few people in the world who could rival him, but he did not expect to meet a monster like Nie Tian. However, he did not regret letting Nie Tian complete the heavenly beacon blood sacrifice. If this world was filled with a bunch of mediocre people, then wouldn't there be too much fun? Don't worry, the space-time whirlpool only swallowed you. As for the Fengtian sect, it is not as weak as you think. Nie Tian sneered and took a deep breath. The aura around him became even more tyrannical. How could he not see that Yuan Tianjili was already a little timid? This was the best time for him to do so. At this time, the two were very close. Even if Yuan Tianjili wanted to use the ghost chi, it was definitely not in time. No matter how strong a martial artist was, if they wanted to use their Yuan power, they had to circulate it through their Yuan meridian, which required some time. However, it was different in a fight between martial bodies. One punch and one kick could be used to instantly subdue the enemy. At this time, if Yuan Tianjili wanted to use his Yuan power to escape, it was tantamount to suicide. With Nie Tian's ability, he could directly take Yuan Tianjili's life in an instant. Originally, Nie Tian only wanted to use their martial bodies to seriously injure Yuan Tianjili, but he did not expect to usher in an opportunity to win. It seemed that this battle was going more smoothly than he had expected. So overbearing, are you sure you have victory in your hands? Yuan Tianjili clearly did not expect Nie Tian to be so overbearing. He immediately spoke in a low voice and punched out fiercely, but it was as if he had punched an incomparably thick stone wall. Even so, Nie Tian was still forced to take a step back. You really are timid. Nie Tian stabilized his body, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Yuan Tianjili did not hesitate to injure himself to force him back. Clearly, his martial body had been injured. However, Nie Tian was different. Under the situation where he had the support of the 10th Yuan Meridian, his physical strength had been maintained at its peak. Even as he became more and more closely integrated with the clan Vein Light, his strength was faintly showing signs of increasing. Now is the time. In the next moment, the corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched coldly, and he punched out fiercely. The power of the surrounding time and space storm gathered on the tip of the fist, and its aura more than doubled, directly blasting towards Yuan Tianjili. If this punch hit, Yuan Tianjili's fate would be 9 out of 10. Chapter 45-57. One punch with all his strength. Nie Tian triggered the power of the surrounding space-time storm and exploded with a power that exceeded the limit, striking directly at Yuan Tianjili. The power of this punch, even if it did not contain any essence energy, was enough to destroy a large city's city protection array. Nie Tian thought to himself that even with the strength of his current martial body, if he were to withstand this punch, he would definitely be seriously injured. Although Yuan Tianjili's martial body was very strong, it was still weaker than Nie Tian's. He definitely could not withstand this punch. But the next moment, a strange scene happened. Nie Tian's punch landed, but there was no expected backlash. Instead, it seemed to hit the void like rain falling into the sea. It actually sank deeply. The punch missed. Could it be that Yuan Tianjili disappeared? But was this possible? Although Nie Tian could not see Yuan Tianjili's figure, both of them were trapped in the space-time storm. Even if Nie Tian wanted to rush out, he had to pay the price. At this time, if he wanted to walk out of the space-time storm unscathed, the two of them must stop and wait for the space-time storm to naturally weaken. Unless Yuan Tianjili disregarded everything and directly rushed out of the space-time storm. But if that was the case, he would also suffer extremely serious injuries. Lord Beacon Emperor, you can't really think that this is all I have, right? Just as Nie Tian was bewildered, Yuan Tianjili's voice resounded in the void, sneering and arrogant. Huh! Nie Tian immediately frowned. The other party was full of energy and his breathing was steady. Obviously, he was not injured. And judging from the source of the voice, Yuan Tianjili had already left the space-time storm. But how was this possible? What method did Yuan Tianjili use to let himself walk out of the space-time storm unscathed? Nie Tian's eyes dimmed. It seemed that he still underestimated Yuan Tianjili. Immediately, Nie Tian's palm surged with the chaotic flame, and the flame turned into a blade. He forcefully tore open a crack in the space-time storm, and his figure instantly leapt out. The moment he stood still, Nie Tian saw Yuan Tianjili standing coldly in the sky, completely unharmed. Oh? It's the flame of chaos. Yuan Tianjili did not expect Nie Tian to walk out of the space-time storm. He was slightly surprised and said, "It seems that you have a lot of good things on you. You relied on other means to walk out of the space-time storm unscathed, right?" Nie Tian moved and stepped into the sky as he sneered. The power of space-time is mysterious and unpredictable compared to other powers. When facing such a force that can't be controlled, I naturally won't take the risk myself. Yuan Tianjili replied indifferently, and his indifference revealed ridicule. Nie Tian could not help but frown. He instantly understood, and said solemnly, "The one who fought with me just now was not your original body but a clone. You can call it a clone." Yuan Tianjili was still calm. As he spoke, he lifted the black robe and revealed his true face. It was a handsome young face. This face, in the eyes of Pangren, was perhaps only about 20 years old, or even much younger than Ye Tian. Who could believe that the abyss taboo that dominated the world would have such an appearance? "Your Excellency Beacon King, our battle has officially begun." The corner of Yuan Tianjili's mouth twitched. Although his tone was very cold, he was no longer a faceless black robe, but a handsome young man, giving people an indescribable strange feeling. "Good." Nie Tian's eyes slightly darkened. He turned his palm, and the sword in the sky clenched tightly. The sword essence around him rose, and a majestic momentum roared between heaven and earth. After all, it is the power from the ancient holy venerable. Not only did it increase your martial arts cultivation, but also your swordsmanship realm has reached the peak. Yuan Tianjili actually knew what happened to Nie Tian, and he did not shy away from mentioning the ancient holy venerable. Indeed, the ancient holy venerable's heart, the light of the Fengtian sect, not only had Nie Tian's strength skyrocketed, but his swordsmanship realm had also reached the 9th level of Sword Martial Saint Defire. It was a pity that he had not yet reached the realm of human sword unity. From this, it could be seen that even the ancient holy venerable had his limit. Nie Tian's eyes involuntarily darkened. He did not expect that Yuan Tianjili even knew about the ancient holy venerable. And the matter of the ancient holy venerable was not told to Nie Tian by Guling Wuqi not long ago. It was estimated that Guling Wuqi had just learned about it not long ago. Yuan Tianjili had no connection with the Fengtian sect, but he knew the biggest secret of the Fengtian sect like the back of his hand. This was too strange. Could it be that Yuan Tianjili was a martial artist of the same era as the ancient holy venerable? But was this possible? It should be noted that the ancient holy venerable was in existence from the ancient continent era. If Yuan Tianjili was from the ancient era, wouldn't he also be an ancient saint? Come on. Nie Tian's eyes darkened and he shouted in a low voice. The sword will in his body suddenly burst out. Its majestic momentum was unparalleled, and it shocked the surrounding heaven and earth. Yuan Tianjili frowned, and his body swayed slightly under the impact of this sword momentum. What a terrifying sword momentum! The surrounding people could feel the fluctuation of the sword while coming from the sky, and their expressions changed. No one had expected that Nie Tian's sword momentum could be so terrifying. Even the mountains in the distance were faintly shaking under the impact of the sword aura. Very good. Yuan Tianjili's eyes focused, and he laughed instead of being angry. He said, "Although you have not reached the realm of human sword unity, your sword will is not weaker than those swordsmen who have become one with the sword. In fact, it is even stronger. If old Wan Jian had a sword will like yours in the past, I would have been the one who would have lost." Yuan Tianjili might not be a swordsman, but he knew that in the long history of martial arts, only 1 in a billion swordsmen could become one with the sword. Back then, the 10,000 swords geezer had only achieved unity with the sword in his later years. Once he achieved unity with the sword, the 10,000 swords geezer went into hiding in the eternal abyss, so no one knew much about him. Nie Tian might have only reached the 9th tier of Saint Defire with the help of external forces, but his sword will was stronger than that of an ordinary Saint Defire swordsman. This surprised Yuan Tianjili greatly. Under normal circumstances, if a swordsman used external forces to reach the 9th tier of Saint Defire by force, he would be slightly weaker than an ordinary Saint Defire swordsman. But Nie Tian was stronger than a swordsman who had become one with the sword. The potential of his sword will was so high that it far surpassed those swordsmen who had reached the peak. My sword will is not limited to just this. Nie Tian's gaze was cold. He was like a sea of sword will. His sword will swept and whistled, forming a storm of sword will in the air. The fierce air spread out, and wherever it passed, fine space-time cracks appeared in the air. Just the power of the sword will itself was enough to tear the air. The strength of Nietion's sword will was beyond everyone's understanding. It was not an exaggeration to say that if an ordinary low-level saint ancestor of heaven martial arts got within 1,000 meters of Nietion, they would be torn to pieces by the sword will. Nietion, I have to admit that you have amazed me. Yuan Tianjili saw the space-time cracks spread out like threads towards him. He felt threatened and his face became gloomy. He was no longer as calm as before. At that moment, he admitted that Nietion was qualified to be his opponent. Chapter 45-58. High up in the sky, two figures stood coldly. The two peaks confronted each other, and the cliffs stood thousands of feet high. Yuan Tianjili was shocked by Nietion's terror, but he was not angry. Instead, he laughed excitedly. In his memory, he had never felt so excited since the battle between the three great generals and the human emperor in the firmament. Sure enough, only a strong opponent could make him feel the meaning of living. Come on, let me see how far a person who has been recognized by the ancient holy venerable can go. Yuan Tianjili's eyes were cold, but there was a strange look in them, as if he was looking forward to something. As you wish. Nietion's eyes were gloomy, and he shouted in a low voice. The sword essence suddenly broke out, and the momentum was overwhelming, as if it was going to swallow everything. God-piercing sword. The sword was like the wind, and it went straight to Yuan Tianjili. In an instant, Yuan Tianjili felt the fierce momentum rushing toward him, and he could not help but frown. His body shook in the void, and he strangely retreated dozens of meters, easily avoiding the direct impact of the sword's shadow. When Nietion saw this, he could not help but frown, and he was puzzled. He had seen many martial artists with fast body movements, but they could not be compared with Yuan Tianjili at all. Yuan Tianjili's body movement was so strange that it seemed to tear the void, and he was moving without time difference. 8 Baron's sword. In the next moment, Nietion attacked again, and the sword essence surged like an endless beast tide, directly covering the space within 10,000 meters, so that Yuan Tianjili could not retreat. Very good. Yuan Tianjili's eyes narrowed slightly, and his big hand moved in the void, and suddenly turned into yin and yang wuji, absorbing the impact of the sword essence rushing toward him. The tide of sword essence rushed over, but Yuan Tianjili stood in the air, unharmed. Nietion's face darkened again. He had never seen Yuan Tianjili's defensive technique before. It seemed to be invulnerable. Beacon Emperor, your sword will has already surpassed that of a swordsman who has become one with his sword, but unfortunately for you, you still can't break my yin-yang infinite. Yuan Tianjili's eyes shone brilliantly, as if he wanted to provoke Nietion so that he could see just what his limits were. Is that so? Nietionling laughed, but he felt a little uneasy. It had been a while since he had fused with the light of the clan, and he was starting to feel a little uncomfortable. Gu Ling Wuji had said that when the light of the clan resonated with the martial artist, it would devour the martial artist's lifeline and cause irreparable damage to the lifeline. Although Nietion had the 10th meridian, his cultivation was too weak to withstand the light for too long. I have to end this quickly. Nietion secretly made up his mind. Suddenly, the sword will in his body erupted again. The demonic aura shot into the sky, as if a demon had descended from hell. The sharp sword chi tore through the endless void. Yuan Tianjili felt the strange movement in the void, and his expression changed as he took a few steps back. He couldn't help but feel a little confused. The power he felt from Nietion seemed to be endless and limitless. In his life, he had met countless amazing geniuses. Those who had once dominated an era all had one thing in common, and that was their terrifying potential. But no matter how strong their potential was, there was a limit. But in Nye Tian, Yuan Tianjili saw infinite potential. At the same time, the people on the Sky Beacon Square and the surrounding pavilions left one after another and retreated to the nearby gate. The battle between Nye Tian and Yuan Tianjili was so terrifying that the Sky Beacon Square, which was protected by the formation, was on the verge of collapse. At this moment, the sword aura around Nye Tian's body surged again, far exceeding everyone's expectations. The power that Nye Tian displayed was so terrifying that it had subverted everyone's understanding of martial arts. It was unimaginable that someone who was only in the first stage of heaven enlightenment realm not long ago could explode with such terrifying power. There were even many who felt that Nye Tian could single-handedly suppress all the heavens. 12 heavenly sword array, open. High up in the sky, Nye Tian shouted. Endless sword will rolled out and instantly spread in all directions. Boom, boom, boom. 12 heavenly sword pillars appeared, connecting the sky and the earth like a giant. The majestic power enveloped the void as if it was going to break through the clouds. Trapped in the sword array, Yuan Tianjili suddenly felt that the space around him was filled with sword will. There was a strong pressure on him, making it difficult for him to breathe. His expression suddenly changed. This time, he really felt the pressure and threat. 9 limits of the starry sky, the extreme of chaos. At this moment, Nye Tian shouted. The sword in the sky streaked across the sky, and the sword will also rose to an unprecedented height. A sharp aura enveloped the world and terrifying cracks appeared in the sky. Yuan Tianjili could not help but frown, and his expression changed. He had never expected that Nye Tian would be able to do this. He could clearly see that Nye Tian had used 2 sword skills at the same time and had perfectly combined them. When one's swordsmanship reached a certain level, it was normal for a swordsman to be able to use 2 sword skills at the same time. But it was very rare for someone like Nye Tian to use 2 sword skills at the same time. One was a sword array and the other was a sword skill. Different sword skills meant different sword will. Moreover, the sword theory was also different and even contradicted each other. But Nye Tian could completely combine 2 sword will and 2 sword theories, and even the tacit understanding was almost perfect. This meant that his understanding of swordsmanship had reached the acme of perfection, even far exceeding some swordsmanship grandmasters. Nye Tian, it seems that I have indeed underestimated you. Yuan Tianjili did not panic. Instead, he smiled faintly, and the qi of mixed yuan spread around him. Yin and yang were in his palms, and heaven and earth were one. Yin and yang wuji yuan tian tai. Boom! The world shook, and a terrifying aura rose around Yuan Tianjili. Tai Chi turned into one, merging the power of heaven and earth, controlling the power of heaven and earth, and holding the power of heaven and earth. Bang! In the next moment, the sword's shadow crashed down with a terrifying sound. At the center of the collision, a dazzling white circle of light appeared. It exploded with a bang and spread out in all directions, covering the entire area. Hua! The terrifying power was like a river bursting its banks, pouring down. Suddenly, cracks appeared in space-time, and the impact was destructive. The void suddenly fell into chaos, the sun and moon lost their light, and the universe lost its color. Down below, the Sky Beacon Square could not withstand such a terrifying aura. The great formation collapsed, the ground cracked, and the earth cracked. The qi of the earth rushed out, and rays of white light roared like wild dragons. It was incomparably terrifying. The surrounding peaks and mountains kept shaking, and the world collapsed. It was like the end of the world, and in the center of the most intense, blazing, and terrifying power, 2 figures did not move at all. Like 2 rocks in a storm, they were Nye Tian and Yuan Tianjili. The ultimate battle, the battle of the peak. The next moment would be the moment to determine the winner. Chapter 45-59. High up in the sky, the violent impact caused the heavens and earth to sing mournfully. Nie Tian and Yuan Tianjili were at the center of the impact, but neither of them stepped back. In a battle between the strong, life and death was decided in an instant. Everyone looked up at the chaotic sky and could not see Nie Tian or Yuan Tianjili at all. They were shocked to the extreme. Who would have thought that two people with vastly different strengths could fight to such an extent? This battle was earth-shattering and shocked the world. It was destined to be an unforgettable battle between the emperors. After a long time, the chaotic aura weakened slightly, and the wild waves in the sky began to calm down. Bang! At that moment, a muffled sound was heard, and then a figure covered in blood flew out, leaving a trail of blood in the void, like a bloody rainbow. That is! Everyone's eyes trembled violently, and they all exclaimed. They then saw clearly that the figure covered in blood was actually Yuan Tianjili. Everyone was shocked to the extreme, and countless pairs of eyes trembled. They could not help but wonder if they had seen wrongly. How could the one who was defeated be Yuan Tianjili? Although Nie Tian had shown strength that surpassed the common understanding of martial arts, his cultivation was limited after all. Even if he used a special method to increase his strength, it was impossible for him to defeat Yuan Tianjili. Just as everyone was in shock, Nie Tian's figure appeared. Waves of sword will whistled out, directly tearing the wild waves, like a cold and sharp sword, standing tall in the sky. Nie Tian. When everyone saw Nie Tian's face clearly, many people exclaimed. On the surface, Nie Tian did not seem to be injured, and his aura was still very strong. Could it be that Nie Tian really won this battle? In the distance, on a high peak, two figures stood side by side, looking at Nie Tian from afar. It was Gu Ling Wuqi and Chao Qiqing. Lord Beacon Emperor, did he win? Chao Qiqing's eyes were blazing, and he could feel the tremble in his voice. He was pleasantly surprised but also a little confused. Chao Qiqing, who had witnessed the entire battle between Nie Tian and Yuan Tianjili, was shocked beyond words. He knew that Nie Tian had reached the 9th level of the Heaven Realm with the help of the Sect Light. However, he only felt that under such circumstances, Nie Tian's battle prowess was only slightly stronger than an ordinary sacred ancestor in the 9th level of the Sky Martial Arts realm. There was still a gap between him and a true peak expert. On the other hand, the power that Nie Tian displayed shocked him time and time again. Yuan Tianjili's strength also shocked Chao Qiqing. Therefore, he was not sure whether Nie Tian had really won. Gu Ling Wuji's eyes were like torches. The corner of his mouth twitched as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't make a sound. He believed what his eyes saw, but there was a voice in his heart telling him that things were not that simple. Would the once invincible Yuan Tianjili really lose to Nie Tian? Boom! At that moment, a terrifying aura suddenly exploded from the blood-soaked figure high in the sky. Blood chi filled the air and a strange scene appeared. A layer of blood mist sprang up from Yuan Tianjili's body. Then, like a cicada shedding its skin, the blood and flesh scattered, and in its place was a completely different body. Huh! Nie Tian's expression changed at the scene, and he was extremely surprised. He never thought that Yuan Tianjili would have a technique that was close to nirvana. At that moment, Yuan Tianjili's appearance was less handsome, and more domineering. His face also seemed a lot older, and he looked like a middle-aged man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Beacon Emperor, you actually forced me to use my Yuan form. At that moment, Yuan Tianjili opened his mouth. The aura around him suddenly shook, and it was majestic and mighty. It caused the wind and thunder to roar, and there was the image of a mad dragon. Nie Tian's eyes suddenly darkened, and his body swayed a few times. He could not help but take a few steps back. After Yuan Tianjili revealed his Yuan form, his aura actually increased by several times. The power that surged around him seemed to have the power to swallow the heavens. Could it be that Yuan Tianjili was not injured at all? Or could it be that Yuan Tianjili's Yuan form was relatively independent from its previous state? Everyone looked at the strange scene in the sky, shocked and confused. What the hell is going on? This guy is not injured at all? His appearance has changed. Looks like it was just a disguise. This is his real face. His aura has increased a lot. How can this person be so strong? Did Nie Tian's sword just now have no effect on him? The crowd discussed in horror, and they looked at Yuan Tianjili in disbelief. How is this possible? Chao Qiqing's face froze for a moment before he reacted. There was no longer any passion in his eyes, only shock and confusion. He clearly saw that Yuan Tianjili was seriously injured. How did he change his appearance in the blink of an eye, and his aura actually increased so much? On the other hand, Gu Ling Wuji did not look too shocked, but he was extremely worried. He had expected that it would not be so easy for Nie Tian to defeat Yuan Tianjili. However, he still did not expect that Yuan Tianjili would have such an amazing skill. At the same time, high up in the sky, Yuan form, Nie Tian became cold. He could already clearly feel the clan vein light devouring his life veins, but he still pretended to be calm and said in a deep voice, "It seems that this is your original appearance." The current Yuan Tianjili reminded Nie Tian of a person, the defiant demon Li Yuan. The defiant demon Li Yuan was one of the top experts that Nie Tian had seen. At that time, Li Yuan used the deity 8 forms to suppress the Yang God Sword Emperor. His strength was so terrifying that it was unbelievable. Nie Tian clearly remembered that Li Yuan's deity 8 forms had 8 forms: evil, ruthless, roar, brave, kill, lock, berserk, and violent. As for Yuan Tianjili, he had also shown 2 forms. He did not know if this was related to Li Yuan's deity 8 forms. Moreover, their names were Yuan Tianjili and the defiant demon Li Yuan. It sounded like they were related. However, Nie Tian had a vague feeling that Yuan Tianjili was an even more terrifying existence than the defiant demon Li Yuan. Until now, Yuan Tianjili was far from revealing the limits of his power. He. Yuan Tianjili smiled. He did not deny it, nor did he admit it. Instead, he said, "Nie Tian, you should have reached your limit. That sword strike just now was your strongest strike, but it only forced me to use my primordial avatar. How do you plan to fight against me next? If you think that is my limit, you are underestimating me." However, Nie Tian smiled coldly. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile, and his eyes were resolute. Although the one who was injured in that sword just now was Yuan Tianjili on the surface, the one who was really at a disadvantage was Nie Tian. After revealing his Yuan form, Yuan Tianjili's external injuries were as good as new. In fact, he was even stronger than before. Nie Tian, on the other hand, was suppressed by the light of the clan. His lifeline was damaged, his martial arts foundation weakened, and his internal injuries were severe. However, Nie Tian was not afraid, and he would not retreat. This was because he knew that this battle was not for himself, but for the Fengtian sect, for the sacred world of 7 cultivators, and for the dignity of the ancient holy venerate. Is that so? Yuan Tianjili sneered. He felt that Nie Tian was bluffing. Nie Tian's eyes were cold and murderous. The corners of his mouth curled up as he said 3 words, "Fiend God Body." Chapter 45-60. Body of the Divine Demon. As these 3 powerful words were uttered, inverse marks of the Divine Demon appeared on Nie Tian's face and instantly spread across his entire body. Boom! Suddenly, a surge of Divine Demon Qi exploded. The huge impact caused the surrounding space to shake violently, as if the heavens and earth could not withstand this force. Yuan Tianli could not help but frown when he sensed the energy ripples in the air. He immediately took a step forward and stabilized himself. He looked at Nie Tian with a strange expression. He did not expect the latter to hide his strength. but he knew that Nietian's current state would cause great damage to his life veins, and he would not be able to last long. Beacon Emperor, I did not expect you to go this far for this battle. Yuan Tianjili calmed down and said in a low voice, the current you is worthy of me going all out. Then bring it on. Nie Tian bellowed. The divine demon chi around him surged in all directions. Like a demon, he looked down on the world. Infinite yin and yang, 9 suns moved the mountains and rivers. This time, Yuan Tianjili did not continue to defend. Instead, he chose to attack for the first time. His palms gathered yin and yang, absorbed the power of heaven and earth, and pressed down on Nie Tian with the power to swallow the mountains and rivers. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. The sword in the sky pierced through the air like a mad dragon. Wherever the sword pointed, yin and yang were broken. Yuan Tianjili felt a sharp aura rushing towards him. His eyes narrowed and he retreated hastily. However, he was still one step too late. The moment the sword chi whizzed past, it left a glaring sword mark on his face. Yuan Tianjili steadied himself. Feeling the burning pain on his face, he could no longer remain calm. His face was so dark that it was almost dripping with water. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he stared at Nie Tian, as if he wanted to skin the latter alive. This was the first time someone had left a sword mark on his face. Even the 10,000 swords geezer had only managed to injure him. Nie Tian, a warrior of the first level of the Sky Awakening realm, had left a sword mark on Yuan Tianjili's face. How could he not be angry? Are you angry? Nie Tian felt the murderous intent in Yuan Tianjili's eyes. His lips twitched and he snickered to himself. That attack just now had been infused with an extremely sharp eye power. That was why he had managed to injure Yuan Tianjili. He wanted to infuriate Yuan Tian. Only in this way would he have a chance to win. Even Nie Tian wouldn't be able to bear the burden of activating his god-devil body under the pressure of the sect light. Nie Tian wouldn't be able to maintain his god-devil form for much longer. Furthermore, in such a state, the sect light's devouring of his life veins had already damaged his martial foundation. Even if he had to give it his all, Nie Tian had to win. I didn't think that after Imperial Firmament, there would still be someone who could force me to this extent. I didn't think that after Imperial Firmament, there would still be someone in this world who could force me to this extent. Yuan Tianjili's eyes were cold and dark. The ghostly aura around him intensified and his murderous intent was overwhelming. Beacon Emperor, with this battle, regardless of the result, you will be able to laugh at the world. I will win this battle. Nie Tian raised his sword in the sky, unafraid of the ghostly aura. Wherever the sword will landed, it would destroy all evil. Is that so? Yuan Tianjili smirked and said in a low voice, It seems like my patience has boosted your confidence. Why talk so much? Let's just fight. Nie Tianling laughed as he slashed out with his sword in the sky. His fiend god will was stimulated to its strongest state as he slashed out with his sword. 9 waves of sword chi appeared in the air, each stronger than the previous, blotting out the sky as they gushed towards Yuan Tianjili. Yuan Tian Taiji, Heavenly Ghost Scar. At the same time, Yuan Tianjili roared in a low voice. Both of his palms landed on the ground as a black scar appeared, breaking through the 9 layers of sword chi. In an instant, Nie Tian felt a wave of pressure bearing down on him. With a single thought, his astral soul shield materialized as he retreated 100 meters. However, he was still a step too slow. Nie Tian stabilized himself as a black scar appeared on his shoulder. It was actually able to suppress his fiend god chi. Sky-devouring ghost. And in the next instant, Yuan Tianjili didn't give Nie Tian any chance to catch his breath. With a low roar, he dashed over once again. Terrifying ghostly chi stirred the air as a gigantic ghost face manifested. Its might was so great that it felt as though the heavens and earth were collapsing as it bore down on Nie Tian. 9 limits of starry sky, Sun annihilation. At this critical moment, Nye Tian roared as astral energy erupted from his body. Pointing his sword at the heavens, sword shadows whistled out, forcibly resisting the pressure of the ghost face. Bang! Up in the air, the two of them collided. Immense amounts of evil energy and astral energy gushed out in all directions, wreaking havoc in the air. A pair of astral soul wings appeared behind Nye Tian's back as he borrowed the momentum to retreat. Want to escape? Not so easy. Yuan Tian Zhili pursued relentlessly. Evidently, he didn't want to give Nye Tian any time to recover. His silhouette flickered several times in the air, directly appearing beside Nye Tian. Ghost Dragon Slaughter, Blood Luo Calamity. Yuan Tian Zhili's eyes were cold to the extreme. With a low roar, a ghostly chi pierced through the air, directly transforming into a calamity seal, enveloping Nye Tian. Nye Tian couldn't help but frown. Astral energy surged in his palm as the soul-severing heavenly seal appeared once again. This time, the aura and might of the soul-severing heavenly seal were completely different. How could Nye Tian not see that Yuan Tian Zhili didn't want to kill him? Instead, he wanted to control him. It seemed like he had some ulterior motives. Something that could tempt Yuan Tian Zhili. Nye Tian didn't think too much about it. It must be the heart of the ancient saint venerable, the light of the bloodline. Oh! Yuan Tian Zhili's eyes narrowed slightly. He couldn't help but be surprised. Nye Tian's methods had exceeded his expectations time and time again. Yuan Tian Tai Su, black and yellow returned to one, ghost flow all phenomena. In the next moment, Yuan Tian Zhili used his ultimate move again. His palms were like heaven and earth, and yin and yang were released. A gust of mixed origin chi appeared, shrouding the void and imprisoning everything. At the same time, it was accompanied by an extremely strong murderous force. Nye Tian's figure retreated rapidly, but he was shocked to find that the space suddenly became heavy. A huge pressure came from all directions, making it difficult for him to move. It's over. Seeing this, Yuan Tian Zhili shouted coldly. Several ghost blades attacked Nye Tian at the same time. Indeed, it's over. But Nye Tian was not afraid at all. Instead, the corners of his mouth pulled up into a strange smile. His eyes were as dark as the abyss. Suddenly, the surrounding atmosphere changed. Suddenly, the sun and the moon lost their light, and the world lost its color. It was as if they had fallen into an endless abyss. In an instant, Yuan Tian Zhili suddenly sensed something. His expression changed drastically, and he exclaimed in surprise. He hurriedly retreated, but he felt that the void around him was soft, as if he had fallen into a pool of weak water. He was unable to move. Yuan Tian Zhili, this time, do you still have a way to escape? In the endless darkness, Nye Tian's voice sounded like the tolling of a funeral bell, shaking Yuan Tian Zhili to the core. When did you set up this eye barrier? Yuan Tian Zhili's 5 senses were completely disabled. He could not sense anything around him at all. He could only rely on his most primitive instinct to growl. You have already fallen into my eye barrier since the first strike after I activated the celestial demon body. Nye Tian's voice rang out again, as if it had come from the abyss itself. With a hint of playfulness in his voice, he said, Now, let me try the new ability of the eyes of the devil and God, World Burial by 1,000 Cuts. Chapter 4561. World Burial was the new ability of the pupils of the Fiend God. As it turned out, Nye Tian, who had reached the 9th level of the Sky Martial Realm, had not only improved his swordsmanship, but his Fiend God physique had also improved. The reason why Nye Tian didn't use his Fiend God physique and pupils of the Fiend God was because he knew that Yuan Tian Zhili was extremely cunning and difficult to deal with. He wanted to save his most stable killing move for last. At this moment, within the eye barrier, even if Yuan Tian Zhili had other forms, it would be useless. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As soon as Nye Tian finished speaking, countless sharp eye blades appeared within the eye space, as if they had automatically appeared from the void. They filled the sky and tore everything apart. Yuan Tianjili felt the fierce aura rushing towards him. He almost subconsciously wanted to resist, but he found that all his power seemed to have been sealed. He couldn't use it at all. Moreover, he felt as if he had fallen into a pool of weak water. He couldn't move at all. Most terrifyingly, there was an invisible force in the surrounding space that tightly confined Yuan Tianjili, turning him into a live target. Poof, poof, poof. The next moment, thousands of eye blades fell, and the sound of flesh being torn apart was heard. It was really like a death by 1,000 cuts. In the blink of an eye, Yuan Tianjili's skin and flesh were all cut off, leaving only a body of white bones. Extreme demonic destruction seal. Even so, Nye Tian didn't relax. His demonic eye trembled, and a dark soul seal swept out, enveloping the body of white bones. It instantly contracted and shattered. Now it's really over. Nye Tian watched the body of white bones shatter and scatter into the air. Only then did he let out a long breath. His eyes dimmed, and the eye barrier disappeared. The moment the eye barrier disappeared, the sky became clear again. The sky was clear and vast. Apart from the smell of blood, everything seemed to have returned to normal. The crowd looked at Nye Tian in the sky and gasped. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. They did not know what had happened. They only saw the sky turn as dark as an abyss. Then, Nye Tian and Yuan Tianjili disappeared into the darkness. After that, time and space returned to normal. Nye Tian's figure appeared, but Yuan Tianjili was nowhere to be seen. Everyone's eyes trembled. They already had a guess in their hearts, but they didn't dare to believe it. That expert from the Li clan has disappeared. Could he have been killed by Nye Tian? Just now, when space and time fell into darkness, it seems to have something to do with Nye Tian's eyes. It seems that Nye Tian really won this battle. Nye Tian really won. This is unbelievable. The crowd discussed in low voices. They were extremely shocked. Nye Tian, who only had the cultivation of the first-layer Heaven Awakening realm, had killed a top-tier martial artist. This was unbelievable. Until now, the crowd still didn't understand how Nye Tian's strength had suddenly become so strong. Master Beacon Emperor really won. Chao Qiqing, who was on the peak in the distance, felt like he was dreaming. His eyes were dull, and he was about to cry tears of joy. Nye Tian was too terrifying. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Chao Qiqing would never have believed that someone in this world could utilize the power of the clan light to such an extent. Gu Ling Wuji, who was standing to the side, was stunned for a long time. After he regained his senses, he didn't say anything and nodded heavily. Puff. However, at that moment, Nye Tian, who was high up in the sky, trembled and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as white as a sheet and looked extremely ugly. The pressure from the clan light was already extremely heavy to begin with. Now that he had forcefully activated the godly demonic body, the clan light's devouring power had increased by a few times. Furthermore, he had activated the eyes of the demon and god, allowing the devouring power of the clan light to reach its maximum. With so many layers of pressure, no matter how strong Nye Tian's martial body was, he couldn't withstand it. Nye Tian. Gu Ling Wuji immediately came to Nye Tian's side and held on to Nye Tian when he noticed the change in Nye Tian's condition. Nye Tian's body swayed slightly. He didn't even have the strength to remain standing. Master Beacon Emperor, how are you feeling? Chao Qiqing arrived as well. He looked at Nye Tian nervously and asked. I'm fine. Nye Tian took a deep breath and tried to hold on. Hurry up and force the clan light out of your body. Chao Qiqing tried to sense Nye Tian's condition, but his aura was blocked by the clan light. I can't do it. Nye Tian's face was pale as he struggled to speak. He had already tried many times, but he couldn't force the clan light out of his body. It was as if the clan light had somehow merged with his martial body. It was very strange. Chao Qiqing and Gu Lingwuji looked at each other, both confused. Under normal circumstances, when Nie Tian's martial body couldn't withstand it, the clan light would automatically leave his body. However, Nie Tian had obviously reached his limit. He couldn't force the clan light out of his body. It was very strange. Is the clan light going to completely merge with Master Beacon Emperor? After a while, Chao Qiqing suddenly had a bold idea. Even he broke out in cold sweat. That's impossible. Gu Lingwuji's eyes darkened as he shook his head firmly. The clan light was the heart of the ancient saint Venerable. It was almost impossible for it to merge with a martial artist. Normally, when a martial artist merged with a certain type of power, it was basically ownerless or mild. The clan light was the heart of the ancient saint Venerable. It could be seen as a kind of bloodline power. In order to merge with the clan light, one would first have to face the rejection of the bloodline. This kind of resistance was extremely strong, enough to destroy any martial artist. Not to mention that Nie Tian wasn't related to the ancient saint Venerable. Even if he was the descendant of the ancient saint Venerable, after such a long time, his bloodline had diluted to almost nothing. Therefore, he couldn't merge with the clan light. Chao Qiqing, let's work together and force the clan light out. Gu Lingwuji knew that if the clan light couldn't leave Nie Tian's body, it would devour the latter's lifeline. All right. Chao Qiqing agreed. The two of them slapped their palms on Nie Tian's back at the same time. Suddenly, two powerful forces rushed into Nie Tian's body. Puff! Before Nie Tian could react, the clan light was forced out. The moment the clan light left his body, Nie Tian's face turned pale. His cheeks sunk in like a corpse. Master Beacon Emperor! Chao Qiqing immediately held onto Nie Tian. When he sensed the latter's condition, his face suddenly changed. He could feel that Nie Tian's 9 lifelines were severely damaged. There were cracks all over them, and they were showing signs of collapsing. What was more serious was that he couldn't sense the 10th lifeline. Nie Tian's 10th lifeline had disappeared. Could it be that the 10th lifeline had been completely devoured by the clan light? At that moment, the void in front of Nie Tian and the other two trembled strangely. Immediately, a dark and fierce aura appeared. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into a human figure, Yuantian Zhili. Chapter 4562. Yuantian Zhili. The moment they saw the figure in front of them, Nie Tian, Gu Lingwuji, and Chao Qiqing exclaimed at the same time. No one thought that Yuantian Zhili was still alive. How is this possible? Nie Tian struggled to keep himself awake as he looked at the figure in front of him in disbelief. He destroyed Yuantian Zhili's martial body with the world burial dismemberment, and then to prevent the latter's divine soul from escaping, he deliberately used the extreme demon annihilation seal to completely erase the power of his divine soul. But now Yuantian Zhili was still alive. This was too unbelievable. Why, Beacon Emperor, do you think it's impossible for me to still be alive? Yuantian Zhili's eyes were extremely cold as he stared at Nie Tian with extreme resentment. It's impossible for you to still be alive. Nie Tian's eyes were cold as he said in a heavy tone. He did not believe that anyone in this world could still survive in a situation where both their body and soul were destroyed. Is that so? Yuantian Zhili sneered and said, You did destroy my martial body and divine soul, but my original soul is immortal. Original soul. Nie Tian's eyes trembled violently in disbelief. Of course, he could see that Yuantian Zhili did not have a physical body at this time. It seemed to be just a fierce aura, but there was still the aura of his divine soul, proving that his divine consciousness was still there. Nie Tian did not understand what Yuantian Zhili meant by original soul, but he speculated that it should be a kind of power similar to the divine soul, but not the divine soul. Yuantian Zhili, in this original soul state, you have no combat power at all. So what if you're not dead? At this time, Gu Ling Wuchi also calmed down and smiled coldly. Yuan Tian Zhili ignored Gu Ling Wuji and stared at Nie Tian. Beacon Emperor, I didn't expect your strength to be so terrifying just by relying on the heart of an ancient holy venerable. I wholeheartedly accept my defeat in your hands. However, I must warn you that the enemy you are facing is far more powerful than you think. Are you talking about the human Emperor Palace? Nie Tian narrowed his eyes and asked in a deep voice. He had long guessed that the one who made the deal with Yuan Tianjili must be the human emperor's palace. However, Yuan Tianjili had never admitted it directly, which made him a little uncertain. Yuan Tianjili smiled with a strange expression. He said, "It's indeed the human emperor palace that I traded with, but it's not the one you saw. The human emperor's palace is like an iceberg. What appears in front of the world is just the tip of the iceberg. The true colossus lies in the abyss that the world will never see." What do you mean? Nie Tian's expression changed when he heard Yuan Tian's words, and he couldn't help but ask. He had already witnessed how powerful the human emperor palace was. It was a massive organization that exceeded his imagination. However, according to Yuan Tianjili, it seemed like the human emperor that Nie Tian saw was not the entire human emperor palace, but an extremely small part of it. Let me put it this way. The master of the human emperor palace that you know is the current human emperor, but he's just a small fry in the real human emperor palace. Yuan Tianjili smiled again and said calmly. How is that possible? Nie Tian frowned, not believing Yuan Tianjili at all. Since the human emperor was the master of the human emperor palace, how could he be a small fry? That was contradictory in itself, and it was more like lying to a 3-year-old. Beacon Emperor, I see the shadow of Yu Tsangqiong in you. However, Yuan Tianjili ignored Nie Tian's doubts and said solemnly with a solemn expression, I dare to say that you'll be the next human emperor. Nie Tian's frown deepened with a puzzled expression. The human emperor palace had already become his greatest enemy. How could he be the next human emperor? Furthermore, Nie Tian had already seen the young human emperor Lin Fan in the Yellow Springs sacred ground previously. That man was the one that the human emperor palace acknowledged as the next human emperor. Yuan Tianjili's words were way too strange that Nie Tian could not make heads or tails of it. Nie Tian, we'll meet again. However, Yuan Tianjili did not give Nie Tian any time to think. With that final sentence, he vanished into the void in a flash. Nie Tian could not help but feel a little lost and could not speak for a long time. Beacon Emperor, are you all right? After a while, Chao Qiqing broke the silence. Evidently, he was also shocked by Yuan Tianjili's words. He suddenly recalled Nie Tian's condition and asked nervously. I'm fine. Nie Tian tried his best to hold on, but his face was as ugly as a corpse's. Chao Qiqing, bring Beacon Emperor back to treat his injuries first. Leave this to me. Gu Ling Wuji could tell that Nie Tian was severely injured and said immediately. Chao Qiqing agreed and immediately left with Nie Tian. Only Gu Ling Wuji was left high up in the sky. He glanced at everyone and looked at the sky beacon square that had long been in ruins. He did not speak for a long time. Everyone looked at Gu Ling Wuji in shock. There was silence. No one had expected that this unexpected battle would actually develop into the current situation. The battle between the 9 people on both sides was getting more and more exciting. Especially the last few people, their strength was already close to the peak of all heaven's experts. Even the strength displayed by Nie Tian and Yuan Tianjili was already at the peak of all heaven's experts. There was no doubt that after today, the names Nie Tian and Yuan Tianjili would spread across the all heavens. As for the sky beacon selection, it seemed to be completely unimportant in the current situation. Everyone, the Feng Tian sect has already given you an explanation. Next, those who are unwilling to participate in the sky beacon selection can leave directly. As for those who are willing to stay, they must abide by all the arrangements of the Fengtian sect. At this moment, Gu Ling Wuji spoke with a deep and undisguised toughness. Since the Fengtian sect had displayed their strength to resist everyone, there was no longer any need to compromise. Gu Ling Wuji also realized that the sky beacon selection was not important. To the entire Fengtian sect, the most important person was Nie Tian. As long as Nie Tian grew, the Fengtian sect would definitely rise. I am willing to abide by the Fengtian sect's arrangements. As soon as Gu Ling Wuji's voice fell, the entire place fell into a dead silence before someone shouted, "I am willing!" "Me too! Me too!" Very quickly, everyone expressed their willingness to abide by the Fengtian sect's arrangements. In the battle earlier, the Fengtian sect had displayed unimaginable strength, especially the Beacon Emperor Nie Tian's unparalleled strength, which was enough to suppress the all heavens. With such a Beacon Emperor, why would the Fengtian sect worry about not rising? Gu Ling Wuji had long expected this outcome. He waved his hand to signal for everyone to be quiet and said loudly, "Since everyone is willing to abide by the Fengtian sect's arrangements, please go back first. We will make other arrangements in 3 days." Everyone agreed and left one after another. Not long after, most of them had left. Gu Ling Wuji waited for everyone to leave and instructed a few hall masters to clean up the mess before leaving in a hurry. He had to quickly check on Nie Tian's condition and determine the extent of the latter's damage as soon as possible.